Chapter 25-20. Qin Zhao believed that since Aqualati Gisli had been preparing a revenge plan for 1,000 years, he definitely wouldn't just charge recklessly. I created an army. Like the mutant octopus? No, the ones you killed in the three-headed dog lab. Then you need to prepare a lot. There's indeed a lot. When do we leave? 3 days later. Do we need 3 days to prepare? No, it's the time to enter Bermuda. To enter Demon Island, Leviathan Abhantagemus's nest, most of them can be found directly by flying over. We need a specific time. Is it that complicated? Actually, it's not complicated as long as you know the rules. Qin Zhao glanced at Aqualati Gisli. Of course, it was not complicated for him. He'd been enslaved by Leviathan Abhantagemus for 1,000 years. The place had probably rotted away. You'll find me in 3 days? No, you'll come to the port. We'll take a boat. Of course. How else do you think we should go? Not a boat? Me and you? A research ship. Why? Do you know how Leviathan Abhantagemus hunts? I don't know and I don't want to know. I just want to know why we chose that research ship. Every time Leviathan Abhantagemus locks onto a target, he'll leave a mark on it. Only ships or planes with the mark can enter Demon Island at a specific time. Isn't he too bored? It should have something to do with his divine artifact part. He used the Starlight Compass to hide Demon Island. What's the use of the Starlight Compass? I don't know. Even in the 1,000 years I've been enslaved, I've never heard him mention anything about the Starlight Compass. Has he used it in battle? He hasn't used it either. Have you considered that a divine artifact that you don't know how to use at all could change the situation and even the outcome? Qin Zhao asked worriedly. Of course, Aqualati Gisli had considered this too. But at this moment, he no longer had the time to think about how to deal with the Starlight Needle. He had once wandered around the world in search of the lost document, hoping to find the Starlight Pointer or the use of the divine artifact forged by the 4 brilliant civilizations. But he didn't get an answer. Instead, he found some ancient texts. But when it came to that divine artifact, it was always obscure. Moreover, he could clearly feel that some important documents seemed to have been intentionally erased. The rest of the documents were all secretive, and it was impossible to tell them clearly. It was impossible for him to spend all his time looking for documents. He still needed to accumulate his own strength. Moreover, his main body couldn't move freely, so most of the time, he had to rely on his subordinates to complete the task. I've considered this problem, but I'm guessing that the artifact might not be used for battle. At the very least, a single part of it might not be effective in battle. I hope so. Qin Zhao nodded. His alliance with Aqualati Gisli was also a verbal promise. The reason why Qin Zhao agreed was because of his past grudge with Leviathan Abhantagemus. It was also because he wanted to reap the benefits without doing anything. Since the psionic ability team went to take the vanguard, the psionic ability team definitely wasn't weak. At the very least, they could put some pressure on Leviathan Abhantagemus. Of course, the best result was that both sides would be heavily injured. But Qin Zhao still didn't dare to be careless. Aqualati Gisli's strength against Leviathan Abhantagemus was still at the level of 1,000 years ago. He probably didn't even know how strong he was now. 1,000 years might not be a long time for a Lord-level demon, but it was still 1,000 years. But after all, it was 1,000 years. Who could guarantee that Leviathan Abhantagemus would remain at the same spot for 1,000 years? Moreover, Leviathan Abhantagemus had a divine artifact in his hands. Aqualati Gisli couldn't figure out the specific functions of this divine artifact. This was a big hidden danger. Moreover, Leviathan Abhantagemus, king of jealousy bloodline ability, was also something that Qin Zhao was very wary of. Qin Zhao thought about it, and decided to use these 3 days to go into a small seclusion. Seclusion in the river map was clearly the best choice. Ever since Old Turtle had ascended, Qin Zhao rarely came to the river map. It was empty here. Only a few of Old Turtle's internal elixirs were left. Every time he came here alone, Chen Zhao would only think of Old Turtle. Of course, Chen Zhao wasn't such a sentimental person. He rarely came here mainly because he was bored. After all, Chen Zhao wasn't an ascetic. But Chen Zhao felt that he really had to focus on organizing his skills here. So, this time, Chen Zhao came here voluntarily. Chen Zhao's current abilities were very complicated. Bloodline of Gluttony, Blood of Rage, Dark Lava, 32 Clones, Jin Transformation, Dark Assimilation, all techniques returned to one, and the 7 awakened pristine eyeballs embedded in his right arm. The most practical of the 7 pristine eyeballs was Shadow Vision, followed by the Eye of Lightning and the Eye of Power. The Eye of Power was the most direct combat enhancement because it could multiply the upper limit of Chen Zhao's strength. The Eye of Lightning was an attack method and ability that were 2 levels lower. There was also the ability to control the power of the world. The power of the world could be added to all of Chen Zhao's attacks. It could be considered an additional attribute that could increase a certain amount of attack and destructive power. There was also the sword control technique that had almost been eliminated. Apart from these abilities and bloodlines, Chen Zhao's foundation was his constitution and celestial power. Constitution and celestial power were Chen Zhao's most fundamental things. On the other hand, Chen Zhao's abilities were too complicated. Every one of them was powerful, but many of them were independent abilities. Right now, Chen Zhao was wondering if he could combine all the abilities together. First, the bloodline of Gluttony and Blood of Rage. These 2 Demon King bloodlines were always independent of his human bloodline. How could he completely combine these 2 bloodlines into his body? No, he had no clue. He had to ask old Zhang. Chen Zhao crawled out of the river map again. He picked up his phone and called Zhang Tianyi. Old Zhang, I've thought about it. I've decided to save your grand-disciple and your granddaughter-in-law. Are you touched at all? Zhang Tianyi was a bit stunned when he received Chen Zhao's call. He'd already asked Chen Zhao many times before. But Chen Zhao's attitude was still firm. No man, no. Why did he agree now without any warning? Divine Emperor of the 9 Heavens. Chapter 25-21. Why did you agree all of a sudden? I'm not afraid that you'll have to die before me. Can't you be a good person? Hearing this, Zhang Tianyi fumed. I'm here to ask for benefits. Zhang Tianyi knew that Chen Zhao had attacked for his own reasons. It definitely wasn't to save Yanghua. But he really couldn't be sarcastic now. If Chen Zhao slowed down in a fit of anger and waited for Yanghua to die, who would he be able to reason with? What do you want? Is there any way to fuse 2 or more types of bloodlines? Or is there a cultivation technique? There are many, Zhang Tianyi said. Give me one. I don't have one. Are you messing with me? Chen Zhao said angrily. I'll let your disciple go. Who are you using it for? Or for yourself? For myself. I really don't have a blood tempering technique, Zhang Tianyi said. Zhang Tianyi said. You can create your own set right now, and it's definitely suitable for you. The blood tempering techniques circulating in the supernatural world are all created by others. No one's situation is the same, so forcibly cultivating someone else's technique might not be the best choice. Create it myself? I don't know how. Simple. First, cultivate a fire elemental spell or a spell and cultivate the heart flame. Then, you have to reach at least the false core realm. You've definitely reached that. False core? Inner core? You can definitely do it with your current realm. And then? Use a fire elemental spell or spell to refine the inner core, then pour your blood into it and let the inner core be refined by the heart flame. This process is basically the same for everyone, but the higher the level of your fire elemental spell or spell, the better. You have to at least cultivate the heart flame, Zhang Tianyi said. Since everyone has the same method, what's different? Of course it's different. Everyone cultivates a different heart flame, Zhang Tianyi said. Zhang Tianyi said. When activating the heart fire, the circulation method is unique. If you use someone else's heart fire method, it can't be said that you will definitely go berserk, but there will be some incompatibility. In other words, the key is still the fire element magic and divine ability, and the heart flame that is cultivated is different, right? There are some details that I don't know. After all, I have never used the blood tempering method. Then give me some fire spells or divine abilities. I'll study them and see what's suitable for me. If you want to cultivate fire spells and divine abilities, you might as well look for Bifla. Is there anyone in this world who is more proficient in fire spells than the fire worship sect? That seems to make sense. I'll hang up first then. Wait. Don't let anything happen to my grand disciple. We'll see if we can make it, Qin Zhao said, unconcerned. Fuck you. Before Zhang Tianyi could finish, Qin Zhao hung up. Bifla, I need a fire spell or divine ability. Can you help me with one? The more advanced, the better. What for? To refine the bloodline. Perfect. We talked about the secret of the Phoenix last time. I've already organized the research data. I'll send it to you now. What does the secret of the Phoenix have to do with the fire spell or divine ability I need? I realize that the secret of the Phoenix's rebirth isn't in the Phoenix itself, but in the Nirvana flame. Mastering the Nirvana flame means mastering the secret of the Phoenix's rebirth. Then Bifla sent all the data he researched to Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao took the information that Bifla had researched and returned to the river map. It recorded the process of each of Bifla's experiments in detail, as well as his thoughts. It could be said that it was more detailed and complete than any other cultivation method. It was more like a tutorial that would teach you step by step how to use the Nirvana flame. Qin Zhao took out the Phoenix's blood. It was a wooden bucket about 1 meter in diameter and height, filled with the blood. Then, he poured in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. The blood would spontaneously combust. After igniting the Phoenix's blood, Qin Zhao also jumped into the barrel. This was the Nirvana flame. However, without a body, the Nirvana flame couldn't revive the Phoenix. Now, Qin Zhao had to absorb the Nirvana flame into his body and merge it with his immortal power and flesh. However, this was the time to test the body of a cultivator who cultivated the Nirvana flame. His body could endure the heat of the Nirvana flame, but it didn't mean that his body could. The moment Qin Zhao breathed in the Nirvana flame, Qin Zhao felt a terrifying pain in his chest. Ah! Qin Zhao howled in pain. The force in his body exploded the bucket. However, the Phoenix's blood didn't disperse. Instead, it was completely ignited and surrounded Qin Zhao. Every time Qin Zhao breathed, the flames would seep into his body through his mouth, nose, ears, and even the pores on his skin. The flames started flowing through every meridian and blood vessel in his body. Ah! Although the flames of Nirvana made Qin Zhao feel pain, his extremely strong body and dense life force prevented him from dying. By now, Qin Zhao's body was burned beyond recognition. Qin Zhao had never suffered such heavy injuries before. Qin Zhao's mind spun furiously in pain. If this continued, he would die for sure. What should he do? Were they trying to play with him to death? Qin Zhao didn't know how Bifla could withstand it. Qin Zhao thought of Bifla. Bifla mainly cultivated the fire element. His resistance to fire was definitely stronger than Qin Zhao's. But Qin Zhao was stronger. Therefore, Bifla might not suffer any less. Bifla couldn't delay the pain for long. Should he merge the Nirvana flame with his magic power or immortal power? No, the immortal power and the Nirvana flame didn't show any signs of merging. In fact, it didn't affect him at all. The immortal power wasn't the key. Then what was the key? The Phoenix controlled the Nirvana flame. It was like an immortal body. But now, the Nirvana flame was burning on Qin Zhao's body. It didn't allow him to be reborn. Instead, he was in so much pain that he wanted to die. What was missing? Suddenly, Qin Zhao thought of a possibility. The Nirvana flame was missing the most important thing, life force. Even if the Phoenix was born with the Nirvana flame, how could it be reborn endlessly without life force? Qin Zhao felt like his consciousness was blurring. He could only stake it all on one throw. He injected life force into the Nirvana flame. Just then, the nirvana flame on Qinzhao's body suddenly exploded. 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 25-22. This time, the intensity of the nirvana's flame was many times greater than before. The area within a radius of 10 meters was engulfed by the monstrous flame. But now, he no longer felt pain. The burning pain inside and outside his body had all disappeared. The charred skin also began to peel off. What surprised Qinzhao was that this near-death injury actually consumed very little life force. It wasn't even 1% of what it used to be. Qinzhao finally understood what Bifla meant. The nirvana flame was the key. He also understood the phoenix's secret. The nirvana flame could reduce the consumption of life force by 99%, which was equivalent to increasing his life force by 100 times. Therefore, it was almost impossible to kill the undying bird under normal circumstances, unless the process was interrupted. It was just like when Qinzhao interrupted Red Eagle's nirvana rebirth. Qinzhao glanced at the nirvana flames around him and put them back into his body. This time, Qinzhao didn't feel any pain. Instead, he felt dissatisfied. Qinzhao reached out a hand. Nirvana's flame burned on his palm. As he closed his palm, the nirvana flame also dissipated. But now, Qinzhao was troubled again. Nirvana's flame could be considered a small success, right? But how could he cultivate and strengthen it? How could he refine the heart fire? Qinzhao took out a large amount of Phoenix's blood. He ignited it in the same way and inhaled it into his body. Qinzhao could feel the nirvana flame growing stronger. However, this growth was only in terms of quantity. There was no qualitative change that Qinzhao felt satisfied with. Qinzhao tried to channel his immortal power into the nirvana flame. Let's see if there's a reaction this time. Although there hadn't been any reaction before, Qinzhao felt that it was because there hadn't been any life force injected. So there's no chemistry. The moment the immortal power entered the nirvana flame, the flames turned from red to bright white. As expected, the nirvana flame, life force, and immortal power could produce an even more intense chemical reaction. Qinzhao thought for a moment and decided to use another method. He would first mix his life force with his immortal energy before throwing it into the nirvana flame. This was the inspiration he got from the process of making some strong fire potions. At this moment, the nirvana flame turned from white to golden. Qinzhao tried injecting different proportions of life force and immortal power. The nirvana flame was sometimes weak and sometimes strong. Finally, after hundreds of attempts, he finally found the golden ratio. Qinzhao's heart jumped. He could turn from a physical state to an energy state. Could he turn into a flame state too? Qinzhao started a new round of attempts. But to his disappointment, he couldn't turn himself into a flame completely. The most he could do was to cover his body with nirvana's flame. However, even though the nirvana's flame had been strengthened, it was not as strong as before. However, the heart flame still did not comprehend it. Does it need to be condensed in the heart? It shouldn't be so one-sided. Should I give it a try? Qinzhao gathered the nirvana flames in his heart. In an instant, the nirvana flame replaced his blood and was transported to every corner of his body by his heart. What was this? Was this the heart flame? Qinzhao was stunned. But when he thought about it carefully, the term heart fire had existed since ancient times. In the eyes of the ancients, the heart was the foundation of a person. Therefore, heart fire should be the literal meaning. It wasn't the fire of the heart or the fire of the soul. After the nirvana flame was transmitted from the heart to every corner of the body, it flowed back into the heart. Over and over again, it went on, growing and multiplying without end. It seemed to have formed its own trajectory. Moreover, every time the nirvana flame circulated in his body, it would increase the power of the nirvana flame by a little. His body also experienced unexpected changes as the nirvana flame spread. His life force didn't decrease because of the nirvana flame. Instead, it was refined, leaving behind pure life force. As for Qinzhao's celestial power, It gave him an indescribable feeling after being refined by the nirvana flame. This burning feeling even spread to Qinzhao's small world. As long as one stood around Qinzhao, they would feel warm. The nirvana flame, life force, and celestial power formed a circle full of life in Qinzhao's small world. Of course, this circle wouldn't bring people back to life directly, but it would make people feel instinctively comfortable. Qinzhao didn't think that he would comprehend the heart flame so easily. There were almost no difficulties. Everything happened so naturally. Using the nirvana flame to refine his bloodline. Since everything was ready, Qinzhao planned to start his original goal. Qinzhao controlled his essence blood to fuse into the internal alchemy. Then the nirvana flame started refining the internal alchemy together. The yin and yang internal alchemy had been spinning all along. After being refined by the nirvana flame, it spun even faster. Gradually, the yin and yang internal alchemy turned into a vortex, a black hole that greedily absorbed the spiritual qi in the small world. The human bloodline, the blood of rage, and the blood of gluttony were clearly separated. But now, they started mixing together in the vortex. At first, it was hard to tell who was who. The nirvana flame was also sucked into the vortex and fused into the three bloodlines. Qinzhao closed his eyes. Even he didn't realize that he was floating in the air with his arms open. The small world around him was like a huge network. Golden flames flowed in and out of Qinzhao's body as the center. In the end, the three bloodlines disappeared along with the burning flames. In the end, the red blood returned. After an unknown period of time, Qinzhao opened his eyes. He looked at his hands. Dark magma spread out. Just then, a huge head popped out of the dark magma. It was the gluttony behemoth. The gluttony behemoth didn't change much, but it had turned from dark gray to black. Qinzhao had an idea. The gluttony behemoth's body suddenly collapsed, turning into countless smaller gluttons. Qinzhao waved his hand in the air again. The smaller gluttony behemoth collapsed again, turning into pure dark magma. Qinzhao retracted the dark magma. His body didn't change at all, but he immediately felt his body enter the dark assimilation state. Usually, after the dark assimilation state, Qinzhao's skin would turn black and red. But now, there was no change. This meant that the dark assimilation state was gone, because it had gone from a temporary state to a normal state. Because the blood of rage had truly become a part of Qinzhao, the blood of gluttony was the same. The first stage of seclusion was successfully completed. The effects were better than Qinzhao had expected. Qinzhao felt that he had to enter the second stage of cultivation. He needed to organize and integrate most of his current skills. 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 25-23. If fusing bloodlines was internal, then skills were external. If fusing bloodlines was internal, then skills were external. But the integration of skills required a plan first. He already had quite a few skills. What level did the integration have to reach and whether it was feasible? First of all, since it was integration, the effect had to be better than the original. Otherwise, this kind of integration would be meaningless. Qinzhao mainly integrated skills this time: Giant Spirit Transformation, Clone, and Spells Returned to 1. These three plus the Eye of Power were the most direct way for Qinzhao to increase his combat ability. Among them, Avatar and 10,000 Techniques Returned to 1 were two completely opposite skills, and there was a clear casting interval between the two. Moreover, the clone had to be activated first to activate Spells Returned to 1. This was because the clone was a clone, while Spells Returned to 1 was a combination. Therefore, the clone had to be activated first before the combination. Qinzhao wrote down the methods of the two skills and started comparing them. Next was the integration and experimentation. After more than 10 hours, Qinzhao finally finished the first version. Let's try. Qinzhao clenched his fists. Combine! Bang! 32 avatars fell out in an instant. Failure! The clone couldn't release the modified skill clearly and the combination couldn't be completed either. The first attempt was a failure. Qin Zhao removed the clone and started the second modification. After a few more hours, the skill modification version 2.0 was finally completed. Ha! The second attempt ended in failure. This time, both clone and spells return to 1 succeeded, but spells return only successfully fused one clone into Qin Zhao's body. 3 hours later, skill modification 3.0. 6 hours later, skill modification 4.0. For the 18th time, Qin Zhao had spent around 80 hours in total. This time, there was finally some progress in the reform. Combine! Instantly, countless illusions appeared around Qin Zhao. The illusions merged into Qin Zhao's body. Qin Zhao took a deep breath and waved his arms and legs. That's right, this was the most perfect modification ever. He hadn't found any flaws yet. Qin Zhao destroyed with all his might in this state for 12 hours. The mountain in front of them had been destroyed by Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao was in a good state. He didn't feel any discomfort. Qin Zhao suddenly had a new idea. It was not necessary to fuse all the skills together. If he were to fuse all the skills together, putting aside the fact that it would be too difficult, it was a question of whether he could do it with his current skill level. Moreover, he did not have enough time. He could divide his abilities into different levels. The first level was the Eye of Power's Strength Multiplier. The second level was Mighty Spirit Divinization. The third level could be the Integrated Avatar and 10,000 techniques returned to 1. However, the most important thing was to give his skill a good name. Of course, he couldn't let himself feel ashamed. After choosing a few hundred names, he finally decided on one. Let's take the last 2 words of 10,000 techniques returned to 1, returned to 1 technique. Qin Zhao returned to the ground and sat down. The forest had been destroyed beyond recognition by Qin Zhao. However, the river diagram was full of spiritual qi, and the inner cores left by the old turtle were not far away. It wouldn't be long before this place was filled with vitality again. Qin Zhao calmed down again because he felt that he needed to develop other types of skills. It wasn't the kind of skill that could strengthen one's body, but the way they attacked. Qin Zhao had always felt that his attacks were too simple. Sword kinesis had already been eliminated. Its area of effect and range couldn't compare to dark lava. It was also complicated to use, so it couldn't be as smooth as dark lava. The Holy Light Cannon's power was also average. It was good against enemies a few levels lower than him. But against enemies of the same level or close to his strength, the effect would be much weaker. Moreover, he had to use an angelic crystal every time. It was really useless to Qin Zhao. The Eye of Thunder faced an awkward situation similar to the Holy Light Cannon. Its attack was similar to the Holy Light Cannon, but it was better in terms of attributes. Almost all creatures didn't like lightning attacks. They were even afraid of them. The Holy Light Cannon was very effective against dark and ghoul types, but it was much less effective against other creatures. The power of the world could only add some additional attributes to Qin Zhao's physical attacks. If he used it alone, it wouldn't be able to deal with enemies of the same level. Right now, Qin Zhao's best long-range attack was the shadows of his fists. The shadows of his fists were still lacking in terms of level. Although they were stronger than the previous attacks, they were still weak against enemies of the same level. However, if he wanted to develop an attack that was at the same level, the difficulty was really not an ordinary one. Think about it. Right now, most spells couldn't even get close to Qin Zhao. The few spells that could get close basically only had 10% or 20% of their power left. Even enemies of the same level, like Lilith's attacks, couldn't pose a threat to Qin Zhao. This meant that Qin Zhao wasn't the only one with this problem. Everyone had the same problem. Of course, Qin Zhao's advantage was that he was an enhancer. Even if he didn't have an attack of the same level, he could still defeat everything with pure close-range combat. Moreover, Qin Zhao's defense might be even stronger than his combat power. Nevertheless, Qin Zhao still wanted to improve. He wanted to try and develop an attack of the same level. A beautiful golden flame ignited in Qin Zhao's palm. But after careful thought, Chen Zhao put away the Nirvana flame. Old Turtle had once said that he shouldn't use fancy attacks. This wasn't his style, nor was it his way of doing things. If it was just a beautiful attack, the Nirvana flame was indeed a good choice. Moreover, Chen Zhao believed that the Nirvana flame could indeed create a beautiful attack. But that kind of attack would only be like the Holy Light Cannon, the Eye of the Thunder, or the Power of the World. It would look good but be useless. But now, Chen Zhao didn't want an attack that only looked good. He had to develop a skill with his best and strongest aspect. A small drop of dark magma gathered in Chen Zhao's palm. The dark magma was like a superfluid. It wasn't sticky at all. It kept rolling in Chen Zhao's palm. Chen Zhao looked at the dark magma and fell into deep thought. The dark magma kept forming all kinds of strange shapes in Chen Zhao's palm. Chen Zhao seemed a bit bored. He was never a patient person. This kind of seclusion, especially this kind of sitting, had almost exhausted Chen Zhao's patience. Divine King of the Nine Heavens. Chapter 25-24. He suddenly stood up and left the river map. He really wasn't suited for seclusion in such an environment. At the very least, he had some ideas or clues before this. Chen Zhao didn't find it boring. But now, he had no idea how to develop a new skill. Chen Zhao looked at the time. More than 100 hours had passed in the river map. It had only been less than 10 minutes outside. He wanted to watch some TV dramas and find some inspiration. Chen Zhao took a large number of DVDs and entered the river map to kill time. However, after watching European and American movies for a long time, Chen Zhao felt rather disappointed. Forget it. Western movies and TV dramas involved the supernatural. The moves, routines, and attacking methods were all quite ordinary. There wasn't much to look at, nor could it give him any inspiration. It was better to look at Chinese or Japanese comics. Perhaps it was because of cultural resonance. Both of them had many things that Chen Zhao could learn from or find new. In fact, some of the attacks that Chen Zhao had developed in the past had been inspired by Chinese and Japanese comics. Regardless of whether it was Chinese or Japanese comics, as long as it wasn't based in reality, there would be a lot of cool skills. But after looking for a long time, he didn't see anyone in the same situation as him. He also did not see any skills that were suitable for him to develop. Chen Zhao had watched at least 2,000 episodes, but he wasn't inspired at all. This made Chen Zhao very unhappy. Chen Zhao exited the river map again. Holding the remote control, he watched a Chinese animation program. Just then, he saw a piece of news. A non-famous animation studio in the country had closed down, and the boss of the studio was currently looking to acquire it. The boss of this animation studio was also a mangaka. He had more than 10 painters under him and had published a few stand-alone books. Unfortunately, they did not achieve the desired effect. Chen Zhao picked up the phone. "Hey Alex, help me! I want to buy a studio." When Alex heard that Chen Zhao wanted to buy a Chinese animation studio, she was speechless. But Chen Zhao was her boss. Who knew what the boss was thinking? Does Chen Zhao want to support Chinese animation? Did he have such great sentiments? At this moment, Zhang Ting was packing up the things in the studio. The dozen or so artists in the studio were also in low spirits. Like Zhang Ting, they joined Dream Studios with the dream of revitalizing China's animation industry. But reality slapped them hard in the face. The domestic market was too chaotic. They wrote a comic together and released 3 standalone books. In the end, the best-selling first episode only sold 11,000 copies, and the sales of the second and third episodes fell to the bottom. Zhang Ting had thought of looking for an animated version. She wanted to rely on an animated version to gain attention and increase the sales of the single volume. But she went to almost all the companies she could contact. The answers she received were all disappointing. In the past 2.5 years, she had invested about 1.5 million renminbi. However, the studio did not improve until her funds could not keep up. However, she hoped that these people who had the same dream as her would have a good ending. At least let them keep their jobs. Therefore, she hoped that someone would buy the studio. Moreover, she was willing to buy it symbolically for 1 yuan. But still, no one was interested in her studio. None of them were famous, and none of them had valuable IP. To put it bluntly, this was a shell studio. At this moment, Zhang Ting's phone rang. Hello, are you Miss Zhang Ting? Yes, I am. May I know who you are? I'm from Baixing Law Firm. My surname is Wu. Hello, Lawyer Wu. What can I do for you? Zhang Ting swallowed her saliva. It couldn't be that there was trouble, right? As a Chinese, when hearing the identity of a lawyer, the first reaction was almost the same. Was there trouble coming to the door? It's like this. I received an agency task from a foreign law firm. The other party wants to buy your studio, and the other party is very anxious, so I want to know the price of your studio. Is it a foreigner who wants to buy my studio? Zhang Ting asked in surprise. I don't know who the buyer is, but this agency task was sent from abroad. I guess the investor should be a foreigner. I have stated the purchase conditions on the company's official website. As long as the investor is willing to keep the studio and the artists, I am willing to sell it for 1 yuan. All the copyrights of the studio's only work will also belong to the investor, Zhang Ting said. The buyer also made a request. All the main creators must stay, and the staff structure of the studio should not be changed as much as possible, especially the creative director, Lawyer Wu said. When Zhang Ting heard this request, she was a little surprised. However, the other party's request seemed to meet her requirements. The only work of our studio is the result of everyone's brainstorming. Everyone is the main creator, and we don't have a creative director. I need to report your situation to them. Okay, I'll wait for your news. After about 10 minutes, Lawyer Wu called again. Ms. Zhang, the investor wants to video call you. Is it convenient for you now? Investor? Is it a foreigner? It's a foreign woman who is talking to me, but I'm not sure if it's the investor. Okay, what communication software do they need? QQ, Air. Do foreigners also use QQ? I don't know. Zhang Ting was a little worried that it might be a scam. After all, the other party would not lose money if they bought it for 1 yuan. Although the work was not worth much, no one could guarantee that the other party was not really short of money. According to Lawyer Wu's request, after adding the other party's QQ, Zhang Ting immediately received a video call request. Hello, Miss Zhang. Zhang Ting saw that the person in the video was a Chinese man who spoke fluent Chinese. I want to know, how much does it cost to maintain your studio for a year? This? In the past 2 years, I invested about 1.5 million yuan, but this is only the basic maintenance, Zhang Ting said. Because it's not even 200,000 US dollars a year, right? Sir, are you abroad? Yes, I am a loyal fan of the warrior that you released, so I plan to buy your studio. I hope that your studio will continue to complete this work. As long as you agree, I will arrange for a lawyer to go over. Of course, I will also bring your operating expenses for the next quarter. Chapter 25-25. Zhang Ting was a bit stunned. She really didn't expect that Qin Zhao would buy their studio just because he liked that lousy work. Sir, are you serious? Yes, as long as you sign the contract, the money will be transferred to your account. However, my request, as my lawyer has already discussed with you, I want all the main cast members to stay. I can raise their salaries by 20%, and I can also help make up for the benefits that you deserve. What about me? Zhang Ting asked. Are you also the main creator of this work? I'm the creator of the studio. I'm also a cartoonist. The title of the work is under my name. Then, Ms. Zhang, are you willing to stay? I can keep 20% of the studio's shares. Of course, the salary will be extra. I'm willing. I don't need a salary. Sir? Boss, I want to ask you a question. Ms. Zhang, please. Do you want to animate the warrior? Sure, no problem. How much do you think it will cost? I think it will only cost 3 million for the first season with 12 episodes. In RMB? Yes. Okay, animated then. If you have other ideas, you can do them too. I quite like Chinese comics. My dream is to revitalize them. Zhang Ting suddenly felt like they were on the same page. Oh, can you gather all the main creators in the studio? I want to know all of them, Chen Zhao said. Of course, no problem. Zhang Ting suppressed her excitement and gathered everyone in the studio. Then she introduced everyone in the studio to Chen Zhao. Hello everyone, Chen Zhao said. I should be your new boss soon, but I'm overseas now and can't go back. After we finish the contract, Ms. Zhang will continue to be in charge of everything. Hello, boss. You're all cartoonists. You all have wild ideas. I want to ask you a question. Is it convenient for you now? Yes, boss. Go ahead. This question is a bit weird. Don't laugh at me. Boss, go ahead. It's like this. I imagine there's such a person. I'll call him X. He's a person who has the strength of 1 billion tons. He can also control a black liquid substance. At the same time, he has a domain of about 1,000 meters. This domain can help this person recover his strength and has a certain ability to control airflow within this range. Chen Zhao briefly explained his abilities. Now, this person wants to use his current abilities to develop a move. Do you have any ideas? That's right. That's right. The people in front of the video looked at each other. He looked at Chen Zhao with a strange expression. This guy was also a nerd. Only an otaku would ask such a chinibu question. However, they had a natural affinity for otakus. Seismic waves. A young man wearing a thick pair of glasses and a checkered shirt said. X punches the ground with both fists. The tremendous force passes through the ground and forms a shock wave that attacks the enemy, causing great destruction. This won't do. I need a directional skill. This kind of seismic wave is an area of effect attack. Moreover, according to the laws of physics, when the force hits the ground, the force will quickly spread through the ground. The destructive power may seem great, but if I'm facing an enemy of the same level, this kind of attack will be meaningless. Air. Everyone thought that Chen Zhao just wanted to discuss imaginary things with them. They didn't think that Chen Zhao would be so serious and directly correct the theoretical deviation they mentioned. Sir? Boss? We're talking about an imaginary person, right? Yes. Then we shouldn't be bothered by the physical deviation in reality. Even though it's an imaginary person, I still hope that you can let go of your thoughts and still follow the laws of physics. Chen Zhao was an enhancer, so his main attack still had to follow the laws of physics. Seeing Chen Zhao's determined attitude in the video, everyone looked at each other speechlessly. So, our suggestion needs to follow the laws of physics under the X ability you mentioned, right? Zhang Ting asked. Yes. Zhang Ting thought for a moment and said, I thought of a skill. I'll call it Neutron Star. Neutron Star? Chen Zhao said. The name sounds like something out of science fiction. X controls the air and gathers it in his palms. Then, he uses a huge force to compress the air continuously. During this process, he needs to inject air continuously to ensure that the compressed ball has enough mass. He also needs to add liquid during this process to ensure that the compressed air is solid. The black liquid that X has is a good molding material. According to the calculation of 1 megapascal is equivalent to 10 kilograms, X can create about 200 billion megapascal of pressure. The density of the solid air will also reach 1 billion tons. A ball the size of a fist will have a mass of 1 billion tons. It'll be millions of times harder than a diamond. If you use it to smash an enemy, they'll basically die from just one hit. Plus, if you fly it to the enemy and extract the black liquid, the structure of the ball will instantly collapse. 1 billion tons of air will be released instantly, causing a strong vibration in the air. Of course, if X can further shrink the compressed volume, the power will increase as well. Zhang Ting added. Although it hasn't reached the true density of a neutron star, It can reach 1% of a neutron star's density. Of course, you can also increase the setting of strength X a little. That way, it will be more in line with the name neutron star. Then you can increase it by 100,000 times and turn the neutron star into a black hole, another artist said. The more Qin Zhao listened, the more excited he became. It seemed like Zhang Ting's plan was feasible. It wasn't just a fantasy. Zhang Ting also gave a physical argument and the process of operation. I'm very satisfied with your answers, Qin Zhao said. I especially admire Miss Stang's imagination. Thank you for working for me. Boss, do you have any plans for the studio's future? It'll be fine as long as you don't lose money in 3 years. I won't interfere with your work and operations. Just give me a copy of your financial report every quarter. Zhang Ting was also very satisfied. After all, investors these days basically wanted to earn back their capital in half a year, get listed in 3 years, and multiply 10 times in 5 years. They also liked laymen to command professionals. They always talked about following the market. Very few people were like Qin Zhao, only investing money and not doing anything. Chapter 25-26. After Qin Zhao ended the video call, Zhang Ting's mood suddenly changed. Was he messing with them? Something didn't feel right. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Outside the open door stood a middle-aged man in a suit and leather shoes. Hello, may I ask who is Ms. Zhang Ting? I am. Who are you? Hello, I called you earlier. I'm Wu Chang. Your lawyer Wu? Zhang Ting asked in surprise. That's me. Wu Chang nodded. If it's convenient, can we discuss the acquisition of the studio now? The signing process was very smooth. There was basically no conflict of interest between the two parties. After the signing, the first $500,000 of the acquisition fee and this year's operating budget were transferred to her account. Zhang Ting finally believed that the person wasn't joking with her. Her mind was a bit messed up. Would someone really buy the studio for a comic? Then spend a few $100,000 to buy the studio? In reality, Qin Zhao had never thought about revitalizing the studio. Rather than buying the studio, it was more like buying the studio's creators. He could use their imaginations to help him develop new skills when he needed them. Even if they had a Manchu Han imperial feast every day, they wouldn't make $1 million a year. To Qin Zhao, this was a very good deal. Qin Zhao returned to the river diagram and tried to use the neutron star. At room temperature, air couldn't be compressed into a solid state. So, he had to add other substances. Dark lava was clearly a good choice. Qin Zhao could control dark lava. It was the best choice as the glue for the neutron star. Qin Zhao crossed his palms, but he didn't put them together. Then, he poured the air and the territory into his palms. However, the process wasn't as fast as expected. Qin Zhao's territory covered a sphere of about 1 square kilometer. Based on the volume of the sphere, it would be 294,375,000 cubic meters. Each cubic meter of air weighed 129 kilograms, so the weight of the air in the territory was about 380,000 tons. To compress a neutron star, even if he absorbed 380,000 tons of air in 1 second, it would take more than 10 minutes. But in reality, Qin Zhao couldn't compress the air in the territory into a sphere in 1 second. Thinking of this, Qin Zhao couldn't help but feel disappointed. But he still finished a neutron star. It took him almost an hour. It was much slower than he had expected. Qin Zhao felt the weight in his hand. It was a black and red sphere that weighed close to 300 million tons. Furthermore, the structure of the neutron star was very stable under the maintenance of the dark magma. Qin Zhao took a deep breath and leaned back heavily. He swung his right arm back as far as he could and threw the neutron star. In an instant, a chasm formed on the ground along the way. Neutron star flew tens of thousands of meters in an instant. Its speed was so fast that it could be seen in the blink of an eye. When he flew to the top of a mountain, Qin Zhao controlled the dark magma to leave. The dark magma immediately left the neutron star, and the neutron star immediately collapsed. Millions of tons of air were released in an instant. In an instant, the air vibrated. The top of the mountain disappeared in an instant. It was not the process of being smashed into pieces. It was disintegration. The mountain top was directly disintegrated. The range was only a few dozen meters. However, its power definitely surpassed any modern weapon in this world. Chen Zhao panted slightly. To him, this was indeed a big move. However, the charging time for this ultimate skill was a huge problem. His enemies definitely wouldn't give him such a long time to charge up. An hour! No matter how chivalrous the enemy was, they would not give Chen Zhao an hour to charge. No, he had to discuss with Zhang Ting and the others. Hello, Ms. Zhang, I'm Chen Zhao, your boss. Hello, Mr. Chen. What can I do for you? Is it convenient for a video call? Yes. Zhang Ting did not dare to treat Chen Zhao as a liar anymore. After the video call was connected, Chen Zhao's first words were, I hope the studio can expand and find 100 more people to create more outstanding works. Mr. Chen, isn't that too risky? Our studio doesn't have a single successful work yet. It's too risky to expand now. Zhang Ting knew the domestic animation market. It was not completely non-existent, but it was still very weak. It doesn't matter if we lose a few million every year, Chen Zhao said seriously. I just like talking to people with wild imaginations like you. Do you mind if I talk to you again? Not at all. I analyzed the ultimate move you designed for X, Neutron Star, Chen Zhao said. According to my calculations, the move looks powerful, but it takes too long to charge. Can I make it in advance and carry it with me? Zhang Ting asked. No, it's too heavy, Chen Zhao said. Zhang Ting found Chen Zhao's answer funny. Her boss's answer sounded like he had experienced it himself. Chen Zhao had also thought about putting it in his spatial ring. However, once it was placed in the space ring, the dark lava would lose control. The neutron star would explode instantly. Then, Chen Zhao's spatial ring would collapse. All of you, brainstorm and help me think of a better move. If the move you think of is to my liking, you can produce as many episodes of the anime as you want this year. Zhang Ting and the other artists all gaped at Chen Zhao in shock. Her boss seemed to be really unreliable. Even if he had money, he could not spend it like this. Boss, what if I want to make a movie? Up to you. Money isn't a problem. Boss, what do you do? Zhang Ting was a bit scared. Was this guy laundering money? I sell alcohol, Chen Zhao said. Don't worry. My money comes clean. Can we discuss it? Sure, but be quick. Zhang Ting and the others also had a headache. Why did they have a boss like this? It was fine if he just gave them pointers. Why did he have to create a person like X? Why did they have to give X a corresponding skill? Boss, other than air, can X control other things in his domain? You want X to compress the neutron star with something else? Yes. If it's something else, it can definitely compress the neutron star faster. 9 Heavens Divine King. Chapter 25-27. Chen Zhao shook his head. No. If I use earth or water, the structure is too stable. In fact, when hundreds of millions of tons of matter were squeezed into a sphere, whether it was solid, liquid, or gas, the effect was almost the same. However, it was very different for Chen Zhao, because he could control the explosion of the gas. He couldn't control earth or water as he wished. He could only use it to smash people. If he did that, the neutron star would lose its purpose. The destructive power of the gaseous neutron star in the river diagram was still fresh in Chen Zhao's memory. The range of 50 meters was basically the neutron star's absolute destructive range. Matter or enemies within 50 meters wouldn't be destroyed. Instead, they would be disintegrated by the shock of the air. Zhang Ting and the others had a headache. Why did they have a boss like this? Yet, they couldn't ignore the benefits that the boss promised. He could turn their work into an animated movie. For any Chinese comics worker, this was the highest request. Boss, can X compress the air in his domain normally and then compress it a second time when needed? A short and fat man with glasses asked. Huh! Qin Zhao's heart jumped. There seemed to be room for manipulation. No. Zhang Ting suddenly raised an objection. In terms of settings, X still has the life of a normal person. But if you compress hundreds of millions of tons of air into an area of 1 square kilometer, let's not talk about whether X can do it or whether he can maintain it for a long time. At the very least, this will greatly affect X's normal life. Compressing hundreds of millions of tons of air into an area of 1 square kilometer around X is equivalent to increasing the density of the air by 1,000 times. With such a huge density, other than X himself, anyone who enters this area will have their lungs burst. Buildings and objects will also collapse. But for an enemy of the same level as X, this kind of damage is obviously not enough. Qin Zhao's heart jumped. This move can't be used as a killing move, but it's very destructive. It's a good move. Think about it. If someone stood in Qin Zhao's domain, Qin Zhao didn't even need to move. He just needed to increase the density of the air in the domain, and he'd be able to cause damage. It was a secret move with shocking effects. Also, during regular battles, the enemy's attacks wouldn't even be able to pass through Qin Zhao's domain. I'll remember this move. Give it a name. Dragon's Might? The short and fat man with glasses said. No, this name is very low, and it doesn't match the characteristics of this move at all. Then let's just call it atmospheric pressure. The short and fat man in glasses said again. Okay, the prize is $10,000. Holy shit, is this even possible? Everyone looked at their boss. Wasn't he being a little too generous? The short and fat man with glasses was overjoyed. Thank you, boss. Come. Everyone speak up. Zhang Ting's heart skipped a beat. Boss, how fast is the speed set by X? Mach 200 max, then can X fly? Yes. Then, if X increases the air density in the domain by 1,000 times, can X still maintain the speed of Mach 200? This? I don't think so. Maybe only a dozen Mach. Then I'll upgrade it on the basis of atmospheric pressure. Zhang Ting said. After gathering a huge amount of air density, X will fly to a high altitude and hit the enemy at the fastest speed. This power is comparable to a nuclear bomb. What's the difference between that and a neutron star impact? It's different. Neutron stars are denser, but the contact area is too small. This kind of impact will only cause penetrative damage. Even if you hit the ground with a neutron star, there won't be too big of a shockwave. However, atmospheric pressure is different. It's not as dense as a neutron star. Plus, with the contact area of 1 square kilometer, it's basically like a falling meteor. Qin Zhao touched his chin and nodded. Yes, this skill is not bad. Give it a name. Let's call it Meteor. I'll reward you $50,000. In the eyes of Zhang Ting and the others, Qin Zhao was just a nouveau riche. He was stupid and rich. If you think of any interesting or awesome skills, contact me at any time. This is my phone number. Also, if you want to make a movie, make a schedule and budget report. Qin Zhao could already hear the car outside. Fail, I should be back. Qin Zhao ended the video call. Soon, the kids came home too. At night, Qin Zhao made some calculations. He planned to try out Meteor on the sea. From Zhang Ting's description and analysis, Meteor wasn't just powerful. It also had a large range. Qin Zhao didn't want to try it in the river map. He didn't want to mess up the spiritual qi in the river map. Qin Zhao flew above the sea thousands of kilometers away from the coastline. Qin Zhao estimated the height. It was about 30,000 meters. He activated all 3 levels of the primordial regression technique. Qin Zhao started accumulating power again. This time, it was more difficult than Neutron Star. This was because when Neutron Star accumulated power, he compressed the air between his palms. Qin Zhao could create 200 billion pascals of atmospheric pressure with his palms. But Qin Zhao's domain couldn't create such a huge pressure. In fact, it was a huge difference. Therefore, it was still difficult to increase the density of the air in the domain by 1,000 times. Of course, he didn't need that much pressure to increase the density of the air by 1,000 times. Under Qin Zhao's control, the density of the air in the domain increased. Qin Zhao didn't just need to absorb the air outside the domain. He also needed to prevent the air from leaking out. Qin Zhao also realized that the time needed to accumulate power was even longer than neutron star. Qin Zhao sighed. It seemed that killing moves weren't so easy to develop. After 2 whole hours, Qin Zhao finally felt that the pressure in the domain had reached its limit. Qin Zhao suddenly fell down, but he couldn't keep up at all. The air resistance was too strong. He had to rely on Earth's gravity to go down. Qin Zhao turned himself into energy form, and his speed increased instantly. But he couldn't reach the speed he wanted. While he was falling faster and faster. The edge of the domain rubbed against the surrounding air, turning bright red. When he was close to sea level, his speed was close to Mach 10. The surface of the sea was instantly penetrated. Qin Zhao's domain touched the bottom of the sea. The mud layer at the bottom of the sea was swept away and then hit the land. Boom! In an instant, 1,000-meter wave rose on the surface of the sea. The terrifying wave spread in all directions. Qin Zhao blasted a 1,000-meter crater out of the land at the bottom of the sea. The wave crashed into the nearby coastline. Of course, after spreading for hundreds of kilometers, the wave was only 100 meters tall. When it reached the west coast, it was only a few dozen meters tall. Chapter 25-28. On his way home, Qin Zhao finally realized how big of a disaster he'd created. The LA coastline had been destroyed by the huge wave. Thankfully, it was late at night and not many people were at the coastline. Nevertheless, it still caused huge losses. Qin Zhao had to admit that the attack's destructive power had indeed exceeded his expectations. Even Zhang Ting, the initiator, probably didn't expect it. It wasn't just comparable to a nuclear bomb. It was probably comparable to a hydrogen bomb. However, the difficulty of using the attack was also beyond his expectations. Releasing a meteorite was even more difficult than releasing a neutron star. It seemed that this attack could only be used under special circumstances. The next day, the media reported about the tsunami from the previous night. At the same time, even the Department of Defense and NASA came out to explain that there were 7 meteorites. They said that a large meteorite didn't burn up after entering the atmosphere. Instead, it fell into the ocean. However, the damage was much smaller than they'd expected. According to the pictures they'd seen from the satellite last night, the meteorite should be about 1 kilometer. The meteorite should be a meteorite about 1 kilometer wide. If it fell to the ground, it could destroy the entire west coast. In reality, the damage was much smaller than they'd imagined. Actually, from a normal perspective, if a 1-kilometer meteorite fell, it would indeed cause a disaster as the scientists had predicted. However, they didn't know that it was a gaseous meteorite. Its mass was much smaller than they'd estimated. However, after that collision, Qin Zhao felt extremely comfortable. It felt like all the bones in his body had opened up. If he wasn't afraid that it would be too bad, Qin Zhao would even want to come here every day. However, after the collision last night, and the terrifying destructive power of Eternal, Qin Zhao didn't dare to do anything in the river map anymore. He also didn't dare to do it in front of his house. After all, the destructive power could directly turn Mirror Lake Manor into ashes. Even Mountain Town would probably be flattened. Qin Zhao didn't waste a single moment in these 2 days. He basically went to the river map. Or he would find time to video chat with Zhang Ting and the others. He also promised that if they could think of a skill that he was satisfied with, he would give them a huge sum of money. Unfortunately, no one could think of a skill that he was satisfied with yet. The third day. Mr. Chun, when can you reach the port? Traffic. Wait. Chen Zhao was indeed stuck in traffic. Morning was the rush hour. It was the same in every country. When Chen Zhao reached the port, it was already 10 o'clock. Mr. Chen, this way. Aqualati Geisley waved. Chen Zhao walked up unhurriedly. Why are you so slow? Aqualati Geisley wasn't dressed as casually as that day. But it wasn't much better, just a shirt and a casually matched jacket. I brought you breakfast. Do you want some? Chen Zhao tossed the bag to Aqualati Geisley. Inside was a carton of milk and a sandwich. Aqualati Geisley was still unhappy, but he still accepted Chen Zhao's breakfast. Just then, 2 people disembarked from the docked ship in front. The leader was a beautiful woman who looked to be in her 30s. Her slightly messy hair was pressed under her hat, and she wore a gray work uniform. Are you the one who wasted our time and caused us to miss our sailing time? Chen Zhao turned to leave. Seeing this, Aqualati Geisley hurriedly pulled him back. Then he looked at the woman. Professor Samantha, we didn't spend money to go out to sea to listen to your lecture. I also said that if you want to follow our research ship out to sea, you have to listen to me once you're on my ship. But my friend and I haven't gotten on the ship yet, Aqualati Geisley argued. Don't play word games with me. My research ship isn't for you to play with. Professor Samantha, if you don't like it, you can refund our money. Aqualati Geisley wasn't afraid of Samantha not compromising because he knew that Samantha had already spent more than half the money on the first day he'd sponsored them. Exasperated, Samantha turned to leave. The crew immediately followed him. However, when the crew looked at Chen Zhao and Aqualati Geisley, they were clearly unhappy. Mr. Chen, let's get on the ship. Aqualati Geisley looked at Chen Zhao with a bitter smile. They hadn't even gotten on the ship and already had such a big conflict with the crew. Chen Zhao hoped that there wouldn't be any more conflicts on the way. That woman's temper is too bad, Chen Zhao said, annoyed. Annoyed, Chen Zhao said. I could have just spent some money to get this ship. Why did I have to be angry at her? You think I don't want to? Aqualati Geisley said helplessly. But during my investigation these 2 days I realized that the mark isn't on the ship, but on Professor Samantha. Chen Zhao frowned. Is there anything special about the mark? I didn't find anything special about that woman. Just then, Samantha stood on the deck and roared. Are you getting on or not? If not, scram! Chen Zhao pursed his lips. In the end, he still boarded the ship. The research ship hurried out to sea. This was a research ship with a displacement of 14,000 tons. It had a complete range of functional equipment, and there was even a small submarine hanging on the jib. Such a research ship was expensive, but its maintenance, warranty, and supplies were also very shocking. It could operate for 3 months at sea each time, and it would cost a few $1 million to resupply each time. Normal people might not be able to sustain such a huge expenditure. Usually, research ships were under the names of large companies or universities and relied on them for funding. However, Samantha's research ship didn't seem to be under anyone else's name. It seemed to be her own. Chen Zhao dragged a chair and sat on the second deck. He faced the sea breeze and enjoyed his coffee. By then, the crew of the research ship had already started working. At this time, Aqualati Geisley also came up. We have to go a long way from the west coast to Bermuda. It won't take long. There's a mark on Samantha. Leviathan Baron Tegmus will send his men to pick her up soon. Why does that woman work for a company? Chen Zhao asked. She doesn't work for anyone. She was originally a rich second generation, and she was a lecturer at a famous university. But 6 years ago, her father disappeared at sea, and her father's property was confiscated by the bank, leaving her only this research ship. From then on, she gave up her job and wanted to find the reason for her father's disappearance. But she didn't have enough money, so she kept looking for sponsors. Chapter 25-29. Over the past few years, Samantha has gone out to sea a few times, but she hasn't made any progress in her research. Instead, she's focused on finding clues about her father's disappearance. So, after going back and forth a few times, No one is willing to sponsor her research anymore. And then you found her? Actually, she came to me a long time ago, wanting to get a sponsorship from me, but I didn't agree, Aqualati said. It wasn't until half a month ago that I found the mark of Leviathan aberantegmus on her body, so I deduced that she was targeted by Leviathan aberantegmus. They don't look like researchers. Qin Zhao pointed at a few big guys who were bare-chested and bare-chested. They were operating the machines on the deck. Their chest muscles were even bigger than a woman's. Qin Zhao looked like a little chick standing before them. Temporary crew, Aqualati said. There are always such temporary crew members at the dock. When someone's ship is about to go to sea and lacks crew members, they will come to apply. Of course, they have rich work experience and can adapt to most jobs at sea, said Aqualati Gasly. Including illegal jobs? Yes, including. Aqualati Gethly nodded. They probably acted as temporary pirates. As a great North Sea demon, Aqualati had spent half of his life in the water. Therefore, he probably had more knowledge about the sea than anyone else in the world. Does our beautiful captain know who they are? It's not Samantha's first time out to sea. How can she not know? Aqualati said disapprovingly. Also, when she went out to sea for the first time, she did a few jobs without any sponsorship. I think she's been corrupted since her first time out. She doesn't think we're too big fish, right? I hope she won't do something so unwise, Aqualati said hypocritically. After all, I know her father. Miss, those two are big fish, right? Huperi glanced at Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasly on the second deck. I don't know about that Asian, but that Aqualati Gasly is not a good person. She lowered her voice. I knew him when my father was still alive. But my father told me that if I inherited the family business, I shouldn't be enemies with Aqualati Gisli, especially at sea. No matter how powerful he is, he's still on our ship. At this time, he is just a piece of meat on the chopping board. If you want him to live, he will live. If you want him to die, he will die. What can he do? I've looked for him a few times in the past, hoping that he would sponsor me to go out to sea, but he always rejected me. This time, he directly agreed and even asked me to take him out to sea. Don't you think this is very strange? There's no way he doesn't know what I'm up to. Do you really think someone like him would jump into a trap? Maybe he's senile, don't take others for fools, Samantha warned. But they're on our ship. It's not good for us to do business. Let them stay on the ship for a few days. Then we'll find an excuse to release them at the nearest port. Haha. Aqualati Gisli laughed and pulled the fishing rod hard. Dozens of meters away, a 200-kilogram yellowfin tuna jumped out of the sea. That yellowfin tuna was at least 2 meters long. Its body was perfectly round, and its strength was quite great. Qin Yu lost. In 2 days, Aqualati Gisli and Qin Zhao had become familiar. He had also changed his way of addressing Qin from Mr. Qin. Qin Zhao pursed his lips. No, I didn't lose. Ha! I'm a great North Sea demon. So what? Qin Zhao said, unconvinced. No matter what, I won. There are only a few minutes left until the 2 hours we agreed on. As long as you haven't pulled it up, you haven't won. You don't think I'm so rotten that I can't even pull a small fish up, do you? Qin Zhao had a smile on his face. Aqualati Gisli was shocked. He suddenly staggered 2 steps back. The fishing line connecting his fishing rod had snapped. It was his power to control water that had cut the fishing line. At the same time, Qin Zhao controlled the escaping yellowfin tuna and hooked it onto his hook. Aqualati Gisli's face froze. He didn't expect Qin Zhao to do this. Looks like I won. It was finally Qin Zhao's turn to provoke him. I'll say the same thing back to you. It's too early to be happy. Suddenly, Qin Zhao felt a huge figure in the sea charging toward the yellowfin tuna. Qin Zhao's expression changed drastically as he shouted, "Scram!" At the same time, Qin Zhao controlled the water, wanting to chase the big guy away. But then, he felt another power in the water. It was exactly the same as his. It was fighting with him for control. Qin Zhao turned his head in surprise and looked at Aqualati Gisli. But thinking about it carefully, it made sense. Aqualati Gisli was a great North Sea demon. Wasn't it normal for him to have the power to control water? Aqualati Gisli also glanced at Qin Zhao. He'd heard from Vincent that Qin Zhao had the power to control water. But he didn't take it to heart at the time. After all, he was quite confident in his own power. But now that he tested Qin Zhao, he realized that Qin Zhao's control of water was no weaker than his. Just as Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gisli were fighting for control of the water, the big guy had already bitten the yellowfin tuna in half. It was an 8-meter-long great white shark. It was definitely the king of the sea. Looks like neither of us won, ha? Aqualati Gisli said, chuckling. Qin Zhao pursed his lips and pulled the yellowfin tuna's head up. Fish head stew tonight. Do you want to compete again? What? Compare the control of water. Aqualati Gisli said. How? We can't just fight, right? No need to fight. We'll use water to control the ship's course. You make the ship turn left, and I'll make it turn right. Let's see who the ship leans more toward in the end. Qin Zhao thought about it and nodded. Sure. Do you want to bet? Chapter 2530. Miss, this ship's waves are a bit big. Inside the cockpit, Hepburn was controlling the helm, but he seemed to have trouble controlling it. Cimenta was also suspicious. How can there be such big waves in this area? Wait, is there going to be a storm? Is there any feedback from the radar? No, and the wind vane is normal. Southeast wind, 12 meters per second. Hepburn's face was full of confusion. But the direction of the waves is really weird. It's completely different from the wind. It was getting harder and harder for Hepburn to control the helm. Just then, the ship shook violently. Unexpectedly, Headley was sent tumbling away. The rudder also began to spin randomly. At the same time, the ship started swaying from side to side. Cimenta went up to pull the helm, but he couldn't do so at all. Just then, huge waves rose on both sides of the bow, slapping against the ship. Strangely, the waves weren't slapping in one direction. Instead, they slapped from the left and right sides of the ship. The ship swayed even more violently. Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gisli stood on the second deck. We can't continue. If we do, we'll capsize the ship. Aqualati Gisli was speechless at Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao's control of water wasn't weaker than his, but in terms of precision, Qin Zhao's control was much worse. Originally, Aqualati Gisli wanted to compete with Qin Zhao in terms of water control using a gentler method. But Qin Zhao didn't plan to do that at all. The power he used was frighteningly strong. This kind of power was meaningless on the battlefield. But it was used on the research ship. If he didn't try his best to maintain it, the ship would probably be capsized. Qin Zhao also felt that he couldn't continue. He might as well give up on the competition. Qin Zhao could also feel that his control of water couldn't be compared to Aqualati Gisli at all. But in terms of strength, Qin Zhao wouldn't lose to him either. However, Qin Zhao felt that it was a pity that he didn't win the bet. This was because they were betting on people. Aqualati Guthrie had used Vincent as a wager. If Qin Zhao won, he could take her away. If Aqualati Gisli won, Qin Zhao would transfer his contract with Syndicate to Aqualati Gisli. It was actually quite a pity for Aqualati Gisli. He knew more or less about the feud between the Syndicate and Tiger. Now, Tiger was killed by Qin Zhao. Xian Jiao was considered one of the best athletes in the boxing world, and even in the sports world. There was no need to mention his commercial value. If he could get Sin to work for him, it would greatly reduce the pressure on his finances. Although Aqualati Gisli's family business was huge, However, it also consumed a lot of money. There are places to spend money. In addition to the previous losses, some of his investments were also hit by a cold wave. As for Qin Zhao and Vincent, they didn't have any needs. She just wanted to get her hands on him. When Vincent faced Qin Zhao, he was very arrogant. Therefore, Chen Zhao really wanted to teach him a good lesson after he got it, to teach him how to behave. Chen Zhao and Aqualati Gasly were both irresponsible people. They didn't blame themselves or compensate for the trouble they and the crew caused. Miss, there's a ship ahead. It looks like we're in the same line. Huh? In the same line? Simenta's expression changed. Do you know where it came from? The ship is very big and seems to have been modified from a cruise ship. I've never heard of anyone modifying a cruise ship into a pirate ship, Her Polly said seriously. Hepeli said solemnly. This area should be Giret's territory, but this ship definitely doesn't belong to Giret. At the same time, Chen Zhao and Aqualati Gasly, who were standing on the second deck, also saw the cruise ship. Fuck! Isn't that mine? Aqualati Gasly stared at the ship with wide eyes. He stared for a long time and finally confirmed that the ship was his. However, the ship should be in Chen Zhao's hands now. Why would it appear here now? Aqualati Gasly couldn't help but turn to Chen Zhao. Did you call it here? No, I sold it to a friend, Chen Zhao said. When he destroyed Aqualati Gasly's marine laboratory, the ship had naturally become his spoils of war. However, the ship was too old. It had probably been built for more than 50 years. Many of the equipment was old beyond recognition. In addition, Chen Zhao had damaged many places. If he wanted to repair it, it would cost at least tens of millions of dollars. If he wanted to change the equipment and design, it would cost a few thousand more. So, Chen Zhao contacted Giret directly and asked if she wanted it. Giret was very interested in the ship. After discussing the price, she bought it for $80 million. As a pirate, Giret needed a disguise. There's nothing better than a cruise ship to disguise yourself. No one could have guessed that the cruise ship was a pirate ship. Plus, the ship was big enough to install some heavy weapons. Chen Zhao watched the ship approach. Just then, the pirates on the ship signaled for the research ship to stop. Chen Zhao saw Giret on the deck of the ship. Giret also saw Chen Zhao. She didn't expect Chen Zhao to appear on the research ship. Just then, the ship lowered a ladder. The people on the research ship were all nervous. Giret had a dominating position in this area. She was completely different from amateurs like Simenta. Giret was a professional and also the most powerful pirate in this area. She even dared to attack the Coast Guard. She definitely wasn't someone small fries like them could mess with. At this moment, Giret climbed down alone and jumped directly onto the deck of the research ship. When the crew on the deck saw her, they all backed away. Giret walked up to Simenta and Heperi. Isn't this the little girl from the Padley family? Hi! Simenta tried not to act impolitely. Giret patted Simenta's shoulder. But I'm not here for you. Giret walked to the second deck in a few steps. Hi, Chen. Chen Zhao opened his arms and hugged Giret. How come you're here? I should be asking you that. Why are you on this ship? Giret was already very familiar with Chen Zhao, so she didn't beat around the bush. Another big deal? Why didn't you call me? She really liked working with Chen Zhao because of his abilities and because he wouldn't use his own power to cheat others. Chen Zhao shook his head. It's not a deal. I'm just borrowing this ship to send me somewhere. Why not me? It's not a good place. You definitely won't like it. Chapter 2531. It's not treasure hunting? Giret asked in a low voice. No. Giret nodded. Since Chen Zhao didn't say it, it was probably inconvenient. Do you need my help? Hurry up and leave. Chen Zhao rolled his eyes. Fine. Giret came calmly and left elegantly. The people on the ship looked at each other. The battle they were most worried about didn't happen. However, it seemed that Chen Zhao and Giret not only knew each other, but had a close relationship. But now, Chen Zhao had appeared on their ship. This caused them to be somewhat worried. Their original plan was to dump Chen Zhao and Aqualati Gasly at a nearby port. But now, it didn't seem so safe. Simenta thought for a moment and decided to negotiate with Chen Zhao and Aqualati Gasly. Mr. Chen, Mr. Aqualati, can we talk? In the past 2 days, Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gaslight had been very obedient. They didn't do anything improper. In the beginning, Simenta even deliberately deviated from the route. He wanted to see if they would do anything. In the end, no matter where the ship went, Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gaslight didn't have any objections. It was as if they were really on the ship to feel the wind and waves. But after thinking carefully, they felt that it was impossible. The two of them had connections and were rich and wealthy. Why would they need to freeload her? Sure, what do we eat for lunch? Aqualati Gaslight asked. Are there octopuses in this area? Qin Zhao asked. I want to eat braised octopus. Simenta's face darkened. I'm here to talk business with you too. Isn't this a serious matter? Hearing this, Simenta was speechless. Although she was angry, she still had a faint smile on her face. She couldn't afford to offend either of them. Can you two be direct? Why are you on my ship? Sightseeing. To enjoy the waves on the sea. To enjoy the fun of the sea, a yacht should be more comfortable. A yacht can't go far, Aqualati Gaslight said matter-of-factly. Simenta rubbed his forehead. Guys, let's be honest, okay? Well, since we've come to this point, we might as well be frank. Anyway, we'll stay on the ship for a few days. We won't interfere with what you do, and we won't ask if you want to kill us or do scientific research. After a few days, we'll disembark on our own, but for the next few days, you can't chase us off the ship even if you want to. How many days? Simenta asked. Not necessarily. It depends on my mood. Simenta was even more speechless. These two were so stubborn. He couldn't get any information at all. Mr. Chen, Mr. Aqualati, we won't be docking for the rest of the voyage. If you want to disembark, the nearest port is the port of Hawaii. We'll arrive at the port of Hawaii tonight. Once we miss the port of Hawaii, there won't be a chance to disembark again. Don't worry. If you're annoyed by us, just throw us into the sea and we'll swim back ourselves. You can also give us a small boat. Rowing on the sea seems pretty interesting. Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gisli both looked as if they deserved a beating. Simenta was a bit annoyed. She watched as Qin Zhao and Aqualati pretended to be stupid, but there was nothing she could do. You're really not afraid that I'll make you go into the sea right now? Wow. You're really going to do that? We were just joking earlier. How far is the coastline from here? Very far. Then what should we do? Simenta looked at the two before her. They said they were afraid, but their expressions were fake. There was no fear on their faces at all. Instead, their eager eyes made people want to beat them up. Simenta didn't know what trump cards they had. Were they really not afraid that she would kill them on the ship? Whatever. Suit yourself. Furious, Simenta turned to leave. She really didn't want to continue discussing with these two holes. She didn't get any useful information from them in such a short time. Instead, she was infuriated. Fortunately, Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gisli didn't show any malice. Otherwise, Simenta would really throw them into the sea. That night, the research ship passed by the Hawaiian Islands. However, the ship didn't stop. Instead, it continued on its planned route. As they left the coastal waters, the waves on the sea grew stronger and stronger. Nevertheless, the research ship was still stable in the wind and waves. After all, it was a large ship with a displacement of more than 18,000 tons. Miss, let's just throw them into the sea, Herberly said, annoyed. If they're on our ship, we'll be restrained. Even if we see a fat sheep, we won't dare to attack them. Either of them is simple. You've seen it. 2 days ago, Guret saw the Huaxia man surnamed Qin, and then he ran to our ship to greet him regardless of the danger. Their friendship is really incomparable to that of ordinary people. We can't afford to offend Aqualati Gisli. Do you think they're really out of their minds to come to our ship to play? What could we have on the ship that they're after? That's what I find strange too. They boarded our ship on purpose. It's obvious that they're after something on the ship. Just then, a crewman ran in. Captain, there's a kayak up ahead. There's a man on it. He seems to have drifted on the sea for a few days. He looks like he's starved to death. Cimenta and Herberly exchanged glances. Pull him up to take a look. The two also went to the deck and watched as the kayak was pulled up by a crane. The man on the kayak looked haggard. Who knew how long he'd been drifting on the sea? He was on the verge of death. Only his faint panting let people know that he was still alive. Miss, what should we do? Herberly asked in a low voice. Since we've saved him, let's treat him and see if he's useful. Cimenta replied in a low voice. After that, the victim, who had almost turned into a dried-up corpse, was carried into the cabin by 2 crew members. Cimenta looked back at Qinzhao and Aquilati Gisli, who were on the second deck. These days, they liked to stay on the second deck and whisper to each other. Leaning against the second deck, Qinzhao and Aquilati Gisli watched the victim being pulled up. That person is covered in curses. Maybe he's the one who's here to welcome us, Aquilati Gisli said. What's the point of this? I think I've guessed Leviathan Aberrantegmus's intentions. What's the point? Chapter 2532. If Leviathan left the mark on the ship, it means that he needs resources. If he left the mark on a person, it means that he needs the person, Aquilati Gisli said. Although I don't know why Leviathan Aberrantegmus needs Cimenta, since he left a mark on Cimenta, it means that Cimenta is of some value to Leviathan Aberrantegmus. But the others on the ship aren't the people he wants, so he either recycles them and turns them into low-level sources of pollution or uses them as food. Either way, he won't let them enter Demon Island's waters. Sources of pollution? Like that dying guy? He's a pathogen, Aquilati Gisli said. The curse and voodoo he carries will infect most people on the ship. Those who are infected are called sources of pollution. What's the difference? Although pathogens and sources of pollution can infect others with voodoo and curses, the source of pollution is just a simple infection. After a pathogen infects others with voodoo and curses, it will absorb most of the vitality and power of the other party. People who become sources of pollution will also lose their vitality and become hungry. At this time, they need to constantly infect others, and everyone who is directly infected or indirectly infected will have their vitality flow to the pathogen. In other words, the more people it infects, the more powerful the pathogen will be. Yes. If you throw this pathogen in a densely populated area, won't it be invincible? It's not that simple. Basically, people in the spiritual world know how to deal with this kind of enemy. As long as you kill the pathogen, other sources of pollution will die too. Even if you throw it in a densely populated area, it won't really grow. Unless it infects tens of thousands of people, it won't be much trouble for most spiritualists. Qinzhao thought about it. It made sense. Unless thousands or tens of thousands of people were all gathered in a small space. Otherwise, the pathogen wouldn't be able to infect them all at once. Moreover, indirect transmission would be easily discovered. How is he? Cimenta asked. Looks like he's just dehydrated and malnourished, the doctor said. I'll inject him with a bottle of glucose first. When he wakes up, I'll arrange some food for him. Ahem. Also, arrange a cabin with better ventilation for him. This cabin is too stuffy. Although Cimenta heard the doctor's words, she didn't plan to do so. She did not save this person out of a sudden kindness. He just wanted to confirm his identity, and maybe get some benefits from him. In fact, this logic was very simple. If the victim was in trouble on a ship, the priority to be assigned to the lifeboat would definitely be the person with the highest status or the richest person. Therefore, Cimenta felt that he had some value. Cimenta and the ship's doctor went out of the cabin. For some reason, Cimenta felt uneasy. When he wakes up, let's confirm his identity first. If he's worthless. Ahem. I know what to do, the ship doctor said. None of the people on this ship were good people. Basically, good people wouldn't board this ship. Looks like you're also sick. Don't go to the deck to enjoy the sea breeze for the next 2 days. Cough, cough. Maybe I caught a cold last night. The ship's doctor coughed a few more times. The first infected person has appeared. I want to see what happens next, Aqualati Gasley said. Let's see what happens next, Aqualati Gasley said. Qin Zhao had the same plan. However, Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasley's curiosity didn't last long. That was because the first infected doctor fainted in the evening of the same day. That night, 2 crew members helped take care of the doctor. Then they were indirectly infected too. All this happened under Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasley's watchful eyes. However, the two were very cold-blooded spectators. They had no intention of interfering. Damn it, the guy we saved yesterday seems to have some kind of infectious disease. The ship doctor treated him yesterday, and he got sick. Now the ship doctor has infected the other 2 crew members, Hepeli said to Simenta. What do we do now? We can't keep the guy on the ship. Throw him into the sea, Simenta said, her face pale. Also, wear a gas mask. Don't get infected again. Hepeli nodded and called for the 2 crew members to follow him. They arrived outside the cabin of the person they'd saved yesterday. You two, wear gas masks and drag that guy out. The 2 crew members were a bit unwilling, but they had to listen to Hepeli here. However, the moment they opened the cabin, they were both shocked. Hepeli, come in and see. When Herberly entered the cabin, he was also shocked. The body of the shriveled patient on the bed swelled up a little. The cabin was filled with a strange mucus. The mucus intersected with each other, blocking everyone's path. Hepeli, do you know what's going on? Hepeli's expression was serious. He didn't know what it was. However, he knew that it definitely wasn't anything good. Just then, the pathogen on the bed suddenly opened its eyes. Then, it opened its mouth and spat out a stream of mucus. A crew member couldn't dodge in time and was sprayed by the mucus. The mucus pinned the crew member to the wall behind him. Quick, save me. The crew member screamed in horror. Hepeli and the other crew member were scared out of their wits. The pathogen stood up unsteadily. Hepeli looked at the crew member who was pinned to the wall and shouted, Go! At the same time, Hepeli pulled the frightened crew member out and closed the cabin door. However, they could still see through the round glass on the cabin door. They saw the pathogen stagger towards the crew member who was pinned to the wall. Facing the crew member who was screaming in horror, the pathogen opened its mouth. It didn't directly touch the crew member, but the crew member's body began to wither. On the contrary, the pathogen was withering. His originally shriveled body was becoming plump. Seeing this scene, Hepeli and the other crew member were scared pale. Hepeli didn't dare to delay any longer. You watch over here, I'll inform the captain. Ah? Me? What are you afraid of? That guy can't come out. Lock the cabin door. Chapter 2533. After hearing Herberly's words, Samantha immediately followed him to the pathogen's cabin. Through the glass window, she saw the strange scene inside. Samantha's expression turned serious. Suddenly, she thought of something and exclaimed, Go to the doctor! There are 2 other infected crew members in the cabin. Herbery and Samantha went to the 2 crew members' cabins first. They found that they were withered, just like the pathogen. Samantha and Herbery didn't dare to go in. They had someone seal the cabin door. Just then, a crew member ran over hurriedly. Captain, assistant, the doctor's cabin is empty. He's missing. Samantha and Herbery's expressions changed drastically. What they were most worried about had finally happened. Samantha and Herbery immediately told all the crew members to be on guard. They also arranged for all the crew members to search for the doctor. Everyone was equipped with weapons. If they found the doctor, they could kill him directly. But after searching for a while, they couldn't find him at all. Moreover, the ship was too big. There were many pipes and circuits that people couldn't go in to check. They could only leave it at that. They could only hope that the doctor had fallen into the sea. It seems that the infected people don't become stupid. Instead, they become much smarter. The doctor didn't become smarter, Aqualati Gasly said. He lost his intelligence and gained instincts. Both knew where the doctor was hiding. After he woke up, he wasn't himself anymore. At the moment, the doctor was hiding in the ventilation duct. Does he want to spread the voodoo and curse through the duct? Chen Zhao asked. If the voodoo and curse could be spread over long distances, it wouldn't be so troublesome. Both the pathogen and the source of the infection have to be spread over a short distance to infect the target. He's only hiding in the duct for a sneak attack. While Chen Zhao and Aqualati Gisli were discussing, Chen Zhao suddenly stopped talking. One of the crew members was attacked by the doctor. The crew member returned to the cabin alone. He wanted to lie on the bed and rest. But as soon as he closed his eyes, the doctor climbed out of the duct without a sound. Before the crew member could even open his eyes, the doctor had already pressed him onto the bed. What happened next couldn't be described as disgusting. It was also very dirty. Chen Zhao gave up on the surveillance. Only Aqualati Gasly was still monitoring all the movements on the ship with great interest. For the rest of the day, everyone on the ship was in a state of panic. More and more people were infected. In the beginning, Simenta and Hepri were able to barely control the situation. The infected people were locked in the cabins. But as the number of people increased, the situation became chaotic. Those who were infected did not immediately lose their minds. But they didn't want to be locked up and wait for death. Or rather, they didn't want to die alone. They pulled everyone down to die with them. This caused the two sides to start fighting. This is a human. Aqualati Gasly glanced at Chen Zhao. This is human nature. Plus, you don't seem to have the right to mock me, right? You're attacking your own kind to survive, aren't you? You're using your own kind as stepping stones to escape. Humans aren't the only ones who do this. Demons do it too. I won't defend myself. I don't like the hypocrisy of humans, but humans know how to create. This is something powerful demons can't compare to. Aqualati Gasly said indifferently. He held a glass of iced whiskey in his left hand and a bottle in his right. Do you want one? Bang, bang. Just then, 2 gunshots came from the cabin below. They'd heard many gunshots today. But the 2 shots were very close. Then they saw Simenta and Hepri run out. They both had guns. After coming out of the corridor, they closed the cabin door and bolted it. Only then did the 2 heave a sigh of relief. Everyone in the cabin had gone crazy. Everyone. It was as if they'd gone crazy. They couldn't tell who was infected either. Everyone was infected, but because of this, they didn't dare to come into contact with others, afraid of being infected. Anyone who dared to cough would be seen as an infected person. Those who were infected at the beginning also started to change. This caused the situation to become even more chaotic. Simenta and Hepri could no longer control the situation. So, they could only escape outside. But as soon as they took a breather, they realized that Chen Zhao and Aqualati Gasly were on the second deck. The cold wind was howling outside. The 2 on the second deck were still drinking iced whiskey. Seeing the 2 of them, Simenta was infuriated. Their cabin was already in a mess. However, the 2 of them acted as if nothing had happened and stayed out of the matter. It was as if the chaos on the ship had nothing to do with them. Hepri suddenly raised his gun and aimed it at Chen Zhao and Aqualati Gasly. Are you going to kill 2 of the 4 normal people on the ship? Aqualati Gasly asked, smiling. Both Simenta and Hepri's faces turned green. Do you know what happened on the ship? Yes. The person you saved yesterday had some kind of disease and it spread to your people. You already knew, didn't you? Simenta suddenly vented his anger on the 2 annoying people in front of him. How would we know? Who could have predicted this? Simenta pressed down on Hepri's gun. When the 2 walked to the second deck, they realized that it was filled with all kinds of supplies and food. Where did these come from? We moved them out when you were having a civil war. Is there a problem? You're just going to take advantage of us? Simenta's suppressed anger rose again. Aqualati, you're indeed too much, Chen Zhao said. Is that so? Am I going too far? Can we return these things to them? Simenta's face turned red. In the end, he snorted heavily. Don't be unhappy. Look, I also brought 2 sleeping bags for you. You can sleep outside tonight. At least you won't freeze to death. At this moment, the cabin had completely fallen, and most of those who were still alive had already been infected. Even if they weren't, they wouldn't dare to go in and take the supplies. So, these supplies had become their life-saving straw. Although he was very unhappy with Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasly, he had to admit that they had a clear mind and acted quickly. He was very displeased with Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasly. He had to admit that the two had a clear mind and acted quickly. 9 Heavens Divine King. Chapter 2534. At night, the sea was covered in a thick fog. It was also accompanied by a cold current. Both Simenta and Hepburn shivered in the cold wind. Even their sleeping bags couldn't keep their body warm. Simenta was woken up by the cold. When she opened her eyes, she realized that Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasly hadn't gone to sleep. Right now, they were both sitting on a folding chair with fishing rods in front of them and drinking alcohol. Simenta was speechless. Aren't you cold at all? The two weren't wearing much. It was a foggy night with a cold current. How could they not feel cold? Even the iron railings were covered in icicles. Even Simenta was woken up by the cold in her sleeping bag. It wasn't hard to imagine how cold it was. However, Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasly faced the cold wind fearlessly. It was too abnormal. Awake? Qin Zhao turned around and glanced at Simenta. Do you want a glass of cold whiskey? It feels great. Aqualati Gasly patted his big belly. Simenta was completely speechless. Alcohol could drive away the cold, but in such an environment, even alcohol was useless, let alone whiskey. Simenta couldn't sleep anymore. It was too cold. He couldn't sleep at all. Simenta stood up and put on a thick jacket. Where are we now? I don't know, Qin Zhao said indifferently. Do you dare to enter the cockpit? At this moment, the cockpit had long since been covered by those sticky things. Going in would only result in death. Simenta looked at Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasly. Aren't you worried about your safety at all? Of course, but what can we do? That's right. Worrying is unnecessary, so it's better to just stay put. A while later, Hepburn woke up too. Miss, why don't you sleep a bit longer? What do you think? Simenta said unhappily. Have you thought of anything? Hepburn looked around and then at Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasly. Then she shook her head. It was obvious that Hepburn had something to say. Clearly, he was worried about Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasly. But Hupri gave Simenta a look. Not long after, the two met at the bow of the ship. Here, the cold wind was howling and the waves were crashing. They believed that their conversation would definitely not be heard by Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasly. What do you think? Miss, this ship is completely out of control. We can't stay here any longer. The only way to survive is the submarine. Herberly pointed at the small submarine hanging on the arm. But the control stick is in the cockpit. I'll go in, Hupri said. No, it's filled with that kind of mucus. That mucus contains the virus. If you go in, you'll become like those people. Not for a while. As long as we get rid of the infected people in the cockpit, I will control the crane to lower the submarine. However, we cannot let those 2 people go up. Also, we have to find a way to bring the food up. Happily, you don't have to do this. Of course, Simenta didn't want Happily to die. Her relationship with Happily was naturally incomparable to that of the other crew members. She didn't care even if all the other crew members died. But she didn't want Happily to die. Especially if he sacrificed himself for her. No, this is our only hope. Holding the gun in his hand, Happily looked at Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasly on the second deck. I'll go kill them now, Happily said decisively. Simenta immediately became nervous. Happily, let's think of another way. There's no other way, Mississippi, don't say anything. Happily walked toward Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasly. Suddenly, he raised the gun and pointed at them. Happily, what are you doing? Aquilati Gasly looked at Hepeli. What do you think? I think you're joking. It's not funny, Hepeli replied coldly. Even if you want to kill us with a gun, you should at least load it with bullets. Aquilati Gasly opened his left hand, revealing a dozen bullets. Hepeli's expression changed. When you were asleep, of course, Aquilati Gasly teased. Aquilati Gisli teased. I saw you putting your gun in your belt while you were sleeping. I was afraid that you would accidentally fire and shoot your penis, so I kindly put away your bullets. Aren't you grateful to me? Hepeli suddenly pulled out a dagger from behind him. He seemed to be planning to fight Qinzhao and Aquilati Gasly. He thought that with a dagger in hand, Qinzhao and Aquilati Gasly definitely wouldn't be his match. However, Aquilati Gasly took out a pistol. Ha! You lost. Hepeli's face was livid. He knew that he'd lost. Do you really think that submarine can save Cimenta? How did you know our conversation? Both Hepeli and Cimenta were shocked. The bow of the submarine was 30 meters away. The wind and waves were strong, so the sound couldn't reach them. If I said SF, would you believe me? Ha! You planted a bug on us? Qinzhao and Aquilati Gasly both rolled their eyes. Even an idiot knows what you're trying to do. You want to kill us and take the resources. Mr. Aquilati, please stop, Cimenta finally said. Hepeli, put down your knife too. Hepeli thought for a moment, and finally put down his knife. If he had a chance of winning, he wouldn't give up on the idea. But no matter how fast he was, he couldn't be faster than Aquilati Gasly's gun. Aquilati Gasly put away his gun without hesitation. This action made Huperi eager to give it a try. Yo, the big fish took the bait. Qinzhao's sudden voice gave Hepeli and Cimenta a fright. Qinzhao pulled the rod hard and a 300-kilogram bluefin tuna flew into the air. Then, it smashed heavily at their feet. Hepeli and Cimenta's expressions changed. They really didn't realize that Qinzhao was so strong before. Even the most experienced fisherman would have to struggle for 2 hours to pull such a huge tuna out of the water. But Qinzhao had actually lifted the fish into the air. It felt like he'd caught a small fish. His strength was too terrifying. This fish is enough for us to eat for more than 10 days. In this weather, there's a lot of ice on the hull. We don't have to worry about water at all. We can keep going without taking risks. Chapter 2535. It seemed that their crisis had been resolved for now. Huperi turned to look at Cimenta. Cimenta nodded. She didn't want Huperi to die here either. Since they had given up on the plan, Cimenta and Huperi sat down again. They both noticed that Qinzhao and Aquilati Gasly didn't seem worried about the current situation at all. Or rather, they were afraid. Even though Cimenta and Huperi made a living at sea all year round, they were still frightened by this situation. Even so, they were still frightened by this situation. However, these two seemed to be completely fine. Those who wanted to eat, those who wanted to play played. Cimenta and Huperi were both helpless and speechless. On the other hand, Qinzhao and Aquilati Gasly were still arguing over who should get the meat from the belly of the tuna. Mr. Aquilati, aren't you going to think about how to get out? Didn't I say that we'll get off the ship in a few days? You can't even keep us here. You think you can get away in a few days? No, we're just getting off. Cimenta was furious again. No matter what she asked, Qinzhao and Aquilati Gasly just beat around the bush. They didn't answer her directly or lie to her. The next day, it was already dawn, but the sky was still dark. The research ship was still shrouded in fog. The cold wind was still blowing and the temperature was still dropping. Cimenta and Huperi really admired Qinzhao and Aquilati Gasly. The two of them had been fishing since last night. They seemed to be having a competition. Dozens of big and small fish had already been thrown onto the deck. They probably wouldn't be able to finish them in a month. The two didn't rest at all. $1 million, Aquilati Gasly said. Aquilati Gasly said as he lifted his fishing rod and a fish weighing 2 or 3 kilograms was pulled out. Mine is also $1 million. Let's cancel it. This time, the two made a rule. They wouldn't use magic or supernatural powers. They would just fish with ordinary skills. No matter the size, one fish was worth $1 million. Simenta looked at the two and was even more speechless. The two of them were really bored out of their minds. If they were so bored, why did they board the ship? The third day. Why isn't the fog dispersing? Miss, although we did not control the ship has been moving forward. We should have left this fog long ago. Have you seen this before? No. Hippolyte shook his head. Logically speaking, the fog on the sea will disappear as quickly as it comes. At most, it will only last for 1 or 2 hours. The wind is strong, and it will disperse quickly. I've never seen a fog that hasn't passed after 2 days of sailing. This trip is really strange, Simenta said with a dark expression. With that, he couldn't help but look at Qinzhao and Aquilati Gasly on the second deck. At this moment, the two are sleeping soundly in their sleeping bags. Hippolyte looked at the two of them and said, Miss, do you want to forget it? We have enough food and water on the ship. There's no need to make things difficult for them. And haven't you noticed? Every time we try to make things difficult for them, we end up losing. That was just an accident, Hippolyte said, unconvinced. Those two people have been deliberately toying with us. Haven't you noticed? So what? They're asleep now. Can they still guard against us? Just then, Aquilati Gasly, who had been lying in his sleeping bag, suddenly turned his head and looked at the two people on the deck. I heard you. Hippolyte's face darkened. This damned old man. Hippolyte could not do anything to the two. Although he complained a lot, he did not really mention ambushing them again. Fortunately, Chen Zhao and Aquilati Gasly had caught fish. Although they were drifting on the sea, they did not have to starve. Also, the weather was so cold that they did not have to worry about the fish rotting. They would get tired of eating fish every day, though. But there was nothing they could do about it. Rather than starving, this bit of fishy smell wasn't something he couldn't bear. 2 more days passed like this. Bang! Suddenly, the ship seemed to have crashed into something. Simenta and Hippolyte hurried to the side of the ship to check. Looking down, they realized that their research ship seemed to have hit a reef. There was a huge shadow in the water. Simenta and Hippolyte's expressions did not look good. If the ship hit the reef, they would be completely trapped here. Miss, look! Hippolyte suddenly pointed ahead. Simenta looked up and immediately saw what seemed to be a very large black shadow in the fog ahead. An island? This discovery excited Simenta to no end. It looks like it's less than 3 kilometers from here, Hippolyte estimated. The current wind direction and the waves aren't strong. We can reach the island with a kayak, Hippolyte said. They already had a kayak, so they did not need to take the risk. As soon as Hippolyte finished speaking, a kayak balloon landed under their feet. Hippolyte and Simenta looked up. Aquilati Gasly was looking at them with a matter-of-fact expression. Blow. Why don't you blow? Hippolyte looked at them, annoyed. You've eaten our food for so many days. Shouldn't it be time for you to make some effort? We're not in a hurry to get to the island, Hippolyte said, annoyed. Bang! Aquilati Gasly pointed his gun at the sky and fired a shot. Simenta and Hippolyte's expressions darkened. In the past few days, Qinzhao and Aquilati Gasly had not done anything serious. Simenta and Hippolyte even forgot that they had guns. In the end, Hippolyte still blew. Half an hour later, the four finally got on the kayak. But after a few hundred meters, they realized that the shallow waters around them were all sunken ships. Some sunken ships were completely stuck in the bottom of the sea, with the bottom sticking straight out of the water. It looked like a graveyard for ships. It was quite creepy. Just then, a gust of wind pushed their boat toward the shore. It was the first time Simenta and Hippolyte had stepped on land in so many days. They were so touched that they almost cried. This feeling of solidity was really ecstatic. Tegmis! I'm back! Aquilati Gasly shouted. Hey, you'll expose us if you shout like that. Qin Zhao rolled his eyes. We didn't plan to hide anyway. Plus, he probably knew when we got on the island. I don't feel comfortable here. I can't expand my territory. Of course, the whole Demon Island is within the scope of his domain. 9 Heavens Divine King. Chapter 2536. What are you two mumbling about? Hupri yelled impolitely. Qin Zhao and Aqualati Gasly looked back at Hupri and Cimenta. Cimenta was confused. Was this their destination? No, they hadn't controlled the ship's direction in the past few days. No one knew where they would go. Their original plan was to encounter an ocean-going ship along the way. That way, they could be saved. They had never planned to land on this island. Even now, Cimenta still felt that it was a coincidence. But judging from their expressions, they seemed to have known that they would come here. At this moment, a figure swayed in front of them. When Cimenta and Hupri saw the figure, their expressions changed drastically. The figure was thin and shriveled, just like the pathogen from the other day. How could there be such a thing here? Could it be that the guy they rescued that day had escaped from this island? Thinking of this, Cimenta and Hupri shuddered. At this time, Aqualati Gisli walked in front of the pathogen. Then he raised his gun and stuffed the muzzle into the pathogen's mouth. Bang! How's my shooting? Aqualati Gasly blew at the smoke from the muzzle proudly. Qin Zhao rolled his eyes. I can shoot at this distance too. Be careful, Hupri warned. It's hard to kill. They were all in the same boat now. He certainly didn't want any of them to die. A few days ago, when the research ship was in chaos, he and Cimenta had fought their way out and killed many infected people. These infected people were very tenacious. They could only die completely by shooting their brains. Aqualati Gasly's shot just now might not be enough to kill them. Hupri had wanted to stab the pathogen a few more times. But Aqualati Gasly lifted his foot and kicked the pathogen's head away like a soccer ball. Where are we going now? Qin Zhao asked. To Tajimasa's nest, Aqualati Gasly said. I'll fulfill my promise first. What? All his treasures, of course, said Aqualati Gasly. Qin Zhao smiled brightly. I like it. Aqualati Gasly turned back and tossed the pistol in his hand to her parry. What for? Hepeli didn't expect Aqualati Gasly to give him the weapon so easily. Did this mean that their roles had been reversed? Although they didn't need to fight to the death. But he could not understand Aqualati Gisli's thoughts at all. He would never give the initiative to someone else. However, neither Qin Zhao nor Aqualati Gasly took it to heart. The two of them walked in front. Cimenta and Hupri exchanged glances and followed them. Why isn't anyone stopping us? Didn't you say that Tegnus had already discovered us? He may be dealing with other enemies, maybe the psionic team, Aqualati Gasly said. Qin Zhao's territory was now only 1,000 meters in diameter. It couldn't expand any further. This was because he was now in the domain of others. Therefore, he didn't know the exact situation of the island. The island was much larger than they'd imagined. There were no enemies to stop them along the way. Looks like Tegnus is in a lot of trouble, Aqualati Gasly said gloatingly. Walking out of the beach, there was a dense forest ahead. It was rugged and difficult to walk through. The sky was dark and gloomy, but the vegetation here was lush. Qin Zhao didn't feel that this place was dark or scary. From the looks of it, this was just a deserted island overflowing with life. This island doesn't look as dangerous as I thought, Hepeli said, sighing. Don't jinx it, Qin Zhao said. What did you say? Hepeli looked at Qin Zhao, dissatisfied. Don't you know? What you just said is a typical death flag. In horror movies, once you say that this place isn't as dangerous as you think it is, all kinds of trouble will come knocking on your door, and the person who says that is usually the first to die. Idiot. Hepeli rolled his eyes. How could he believe such a stupid plot? Cimenta thought the same. Just then, an extremely shrill cry came from the depths of the forest. The shrill cries reverberated through the forest. Both Hepeli and Cimenta were shocked. For a moment, they couldn't tell what creature had made the cry. But the sound was too horrifying. Especially since Qinzhao had just joked about it. Hepeli's expression immediately darkened. "Looks like there's really something we don't know about on this island," Qinzhao said, chuckling. He seemed to be gloating. Hepeli recovered a bit and said, "Maybe it's some wild bird or something." "Hee hee. Can wild birds make that kind of sound?" "Even if it's a wild bird," Aqualati Gasly said, looking at Hepeli. "If it can make such a loud sound, it can probably swallow you." "Don't forget that I have a gun," Hepeli said. Hepeli saw the mockery on Qinzhao and Aqualati Gasly's faces. In a moment of anger, Hepeli almost shot the two guys. Not long after, a cave appeared in front of the four of them. The cave was very large. There was even a small stream of underground water flowing out of the cave. "You want to go in?" Hepeli looked at Qinzhao and Aqualati Gasly in confusion. "Why do we have to go in? Who knows what's inside?" "Don't worry, there's definitely no monster inside." Aqualati Gasly didn't forget to mock Hepeli again. With that, Aqualati Gasly walked in first. Qinzhao followed closely behind. "Miss, should we follow? Let's see what they're up to." "Miss, don't you think there's something wrong with them?" "Of course. Even a blind person can tell that they seem to know about this island." Walking in front, Qinzhao and Aqualati Gasly could already smell the faint smell of sulfur in the air. It wasn't fatal, but Hepeli and Cimenta still felt uncomfortable. Normal people wouldn't like the smell of hell, even if it was very faint. 9 Heaven's Divine King. Chapter 2537. The cave was very deep. It led straight into the belly of the mountain. The ground was rugged and uneven. Water kept seeping out from underground rivers. Both Cimenta and Hepeli felt uncomfortable. The ground was too hard to walk on. Suddenly, 2 light bulb-like lights appeared before them. Cimenta and Hepeli stopped in their tracks. Because under the 2 light sources, there was a faintly discernible figure. They could also hear heavy breathing in front of them. That thing was huge, really huge. It was probably 3 or 4 meters tall. Cimenta and Hepeli felt like their scalps were going to explode. That thing was approaching them bit by bit. His body was gradually revealed. Hepeli immediately raised his gun and pointed at the huge beast. It was a huge black panther that was more than 4 meters tall and 8 meters long. "Pennigan, long time no see." Aqualati Gasly grinned and greeted him warmly. "Aqualati, you asterisk shoal, how dare you come here again?" the panther demanded loudly. "Are you looking to die?" Cimenta and Hepeli widened their eyes. Did Aqualati Gasly know this terrifying panther? And the panther was talking? Him? Or him? Speaking human language? "I don't know if I'm courting death, but you're blocking my way now." "I think you're courting death." Aqualati Gasly looked at the black panther named Pennigan with a smile. Cimenta and Hepeli's expressions turned serious. They seemed to have sensed something. But right now, they were trapped in a bigger mystery. An unknown and mysterious world was unfolding before them. "You'll pay for your stupidity." Penny slowly retreated and disappeared into the depths of the cave. It ended just like that? Nothing happened. Aqualati Gasly only said a few harsh words. Scaring away that huge black panther? Isn't this too inconceivable? They weren't equal no matter how they looked at it. However, Qinzhao and Aqualati Gasly didn't seem surprised at all. Their expressions were matter-of-fact. "Let's go. It's not far." They didn't see Penny along the way. But Cimenta and Hepeli became more and more uneasy. At this moment, a light appeared in front of them. The 2 of them were startled again. He thought that the big black panther had come again. However, upon closer inspection, the light did not come from the beast's eyes. Qinzhao and Aqualati Gasly sped up toward the source of the light. Hepeli and Cimenta followed closely behind, afraid that the black panther would snatch them away if they got lost. The iron door in front of them was not a problem for Qinzhao and Aqualati Gasly. Qin Zhao and Aqualati Ghastly pulled open the iron door from the left and right. A huge underground warehouse appeared in front of everyone. There was only one thing in the warehouse, gold nugget. And it was the only one. It was a block of gold that was 10 meters in length, width, and height. According to the density of gold, 1932 g/cubic centimeter. Therefore, this 10 by 10 by 10 piece of gold was 19,320 tons. Even Qin Zhao was shocked. What did 19,320 tons of gold mean? According to the current price of gold, 1 ton was about $40 million. 19,320 tons would be $772.8 billion. Of course, if all the gold flowed out, the price of gold would be reduced to cabbages. If he paid taxes according to the normal procedures, Qin Zhao might get less than 1/10 of the current market price in the end. Looking at the gold before him, Qin Zhao was both excited and conflicted. What do you think? Isn't this a big gift? Aqualati Ghastly asked. Qin Zhao swallowed. Big. Not only Qin Zhao, but even Simenta and Herperi were shocked. However, Simenta and Huperi doubted that Qin Zhao could take it away. Gold was too heavy, and such a large amount of gold could only be transported by super freighters in this world. Moreover, the gold had to be cut before it could be transported. If it was just a square piece, how could it be delivered to the ship? Even if there was a way to do it, if it was placed on a freighter, it would directly create a hole in it. They could not help but care about something that had nothing to do with them. What else? I don't want gold. It's somewhere else, but it won't be as smooth as here. Let's go. Show me my property. 4 people appeared at the entrance at the other end of the huge warehouse. They had different body types. One was tall, one was short, one was fat, and one was skinny. Lord Aqualati, long time no see. I didn't think we would meet under these circumstances, the tall man said. The tall man spoke. He was polite to Aqualati Ghastly. Ha! Are you going to block my way? No, I'm here to take her away, the tall man said, pointing at Simenta. It was always the tall man who spoke. The short, fat, and skinny ones all had different expressions, but their eyes were very nervous. Her? Aqualati Ghastly pointed at Simenta. Simenta and Herperi immediately tensed up. Is she very important to Tijimis? Aqualati Ghastly asked meaningfully. The expressions of the 4 people gradually froze. Lord Aqualati, we won't stop you. Can you also help us complete our mission successfully? Ha! Then you should know that I'm not here as a guest, right? Boom! Suddenly, the wall in front of Qin Zhao's group was smashed into pieces without warning. A gigantic and terrifying body crashed into them. This was a giant dragon covered in cuts and bruises. Tall, short, fat, thin, and tall didn't even have time to react before they were crushed under the huge dragon's body. At this moment, Simenta and Huperi were dumbfounded. What was going on? What the hell is this? It was almost 100 meters long. That was enough to shock anyone. The dragon, covered in wounds, could barely support its body. Then it looked at Qin Zhao's group. Mr. Qin? Why are you here? The dragon asked in surprise. Simenta and Herperi were completely dumbfounded. First, there was a huge black panther. Then, it knew Aqualati Ghastly. Now, there was an even more terrifying creature that knew Qin Zhao. Who exactly were they? Were all the people they knew monsters? You. Who are you? Do we know each other? Qin Zhao looked at the dragon in confusion. I'm Akabuman. I'm Yang's wife. Ah, Xiao Longnu? Qin Zhao slapped his head. By the way, you look hurt. Do you need to rest? Chapter 2538. Just then, 2 demons, one big and one small, fell out of the hole that Akabuman had created. The big demon was at least 5 meters tall. He carried a huge axe on his shoulder, and many parts of his body were covered in metal. There was also a nose ring on his nose. The other one was almost the same size as a human. He was dressed like a medieval noble and had a pair of demon wings on his back. The two demons didn't seem to care about the people present at all. The small demon pointed at Akrabumon and said, "Kwang Tu, cut off this dragon's head. That's my trophy." "Hey! Don't ignore us," Aqualati Gasly called. "Charmin!" The demon named Charmin looked at Orqualati Gisli with a somewhat arrogant attitude. "Orqualati, Master already knows of your arrival. Master asked me to get rid of you, but before that, can you let me collect my spoils first?" Charmin pointed at Akrabumon. He clearly wanted to get rid of Akrabumon quickly. Only then could he devote himself to the battle with Aqualati Gisli. After all, an adult giant dragon was a great threat to him. Although the dragon in front of him wasn't an adult yet, she already had the power to threaten him. Just then, Kwang Tu waved his axe. He suddenly leaped high and slashed at Akrabumon's head. "Come here!" Chen Zhao suddenly waved his hand. Before Kwang Tu could land, he was suddenly hit by an invisible force in the air. He deviated from his direction and landed in front of Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao picked up the handle of the axe that had fallen in front of him. Kwang Tu shook his head and climbed up. Chen Zhao had already raised his axe. "No!" Seeing Chen Zhao's actions, Charmin's expression changed drastically. He pounced at Chen Zhao. But Chen Zhao was even faster. The next moment, he suddenly took a big step forward. At the same time, he grabbed Charmin's neck and pressed him to the ground. The force was so great that the ground shattered. Cracks spread out like a spider web. At the same time, he swung the axe with his other hand. Kwang Tu's upper body was split open. Chen Zhao dropped the axe and grabbed Charmin's head, squeezing hard. Crack! Chen Zhao crushed Charlemagne's head. Chen Zhao stood up and clapped his hands. "Aqualati, why are these two so weak? I thought that since he dared to challenge you, he should be very strong, or at least close to your strength, but Tejimas's men are all idiots," Aqualati Gasly said disapprovingly. At this moment, Simenta and Huperi were scared silly. He was really scared silly. It was as if all the legendary things had appeared at the same time. Dragons, demons, and terrifying humans. As for Akrabumon, he was also shocked. After all, she was abused by these two demons to the point where she couldn't even take care of herself. In the end, he was killed by Chen Zhao in a few moves. She knew that Chen Zhao was very powerful. The ancestral founder had mentioned Chen Zhao many times. If they were in trouble, they would ask Chen Zhao for help. She only knew that Chen Zhao was very powerful, but she had never considered the question of how powerful Chen Zhao was. Now she knew. However, Chen Zhao was more interested in the super gold beside him. He reached out and touched it. The gold disappeared before everyone's eyes. Simenta and Huperi were shocked again. "Xiaolongnu, what's the situation with your guy? The psionic team just landed. I flew to this island first to scout. I thought that with my ability, no one could stop me." Akrabumon's voice became softer and softer. "Haha! This little dragon is so cute, so silly." Aqualati Gasly laughed loudly. "What did you say? Do you dare say it again?" Akrabumon was furious. "You're an idiot." This time, Aqualati Gasly didn't beat around the bush. He scolded directly. "Idiot, idiot, do you understand? You're asking for death." Akra roared furiously. "Asking for death? You think you can do it? Little guy! All right, Xiaolongnu, don't be so rash. You'll ruin my beautiful image," Chen Zhao said comfortingly. "Plus, you really can't beat him." "Him? I don't feel anything different from him. He's just a human, an ordinary human. What do you think about me? Do you feel anything from me?" I don't feel anything special either." Akrabumon looked at Aqualati Gasly hesitantly. "Who is he?" "He calls himself the Great Demon of the North Sea." "Yes, the Great Demon of the North Sea from Greek mythology." Simenta and Huperi thought of the Great Demon of the North Sea. Then they compared it to the fat old man before them. "Ha! This is the fucking great demon of the North Sea? Who are you kidding? But Akrabumon didn't plan to continue fighting. She knew that it wasn't the time for internal strife. Qinzhao and Aqualati Gasly walked to the opening that Akrabumon had made. They realized that they were halfway up the mountain. Below them was a bottomless cliff. On the coastline in the distance, they could see a few landing craft docked. At the same time, there were also some people fighting. There weren't many people participating in the battle, at least not on the coast. But the sky above the island was already a mess. The sky was filled with demons, but they were fighting each other. What's going on? Internal strife? Aqualati Gasly was both surprised and happy. He didn't know what was going on, but it was undoubtedly the best news for him. He guessed that another commander under Tejimis had betrayed him. Idiot, that's the demon army summoned by our ace, Master Belster. What? Aqualati Gasly was also shocked. After careful observation, he could barely tell the difference between the two demon armies. But it seemed that Master Belster's demon army was even larger than Tejimis's. The numbers seemed to be increasing too. He couldn't understand. Who could summon such a large demon army? He couldn't understand at all. Ignorant, Akrabumon said in disdain. Aqualati Gasly was infuriated by Akrabuman. Pointing at her, he asked, Chen, can I kill her? You can't offend her elders. Isn't it a dragon? Unless the Dragon Emperor comes to kill me. No, not the Dragon Emperor. It's the Celestial Master of Mount Longhu. Zhang Tianyi, can you afford to offend him? Chapter 2539. Perhaps Dragon Emperor was stronger than Zhang Tianyi. But the problem was that Dragon Emperor didn't see him in the outside world. But Zhang Tianyi was different. If he wanted someone, he could fly over to the Pacific Ocean with a sword. That would be a piece of cake. Hearing this, Aqualati Gisli's face looked like he'd eaten shit. But soon, his attention returned to the battlefield above Demon Island. The psionic team had a large demon army, but they weren't strong. However, their strength was generally not strong. Although there were many mid-level demons, only one of them had a demonic domain. On the other hand, even though the evil demon army of the Demon Island was inferior to the spiritual power team in terms of numbers, there were still many powerful evil demons. There were also many demons with demonic domains. Chen Zhao looked over and saw 6 or 7 big demons. There were strong and weak mid-level demons too. The difference in strength was huge. The most obvious characteristic was their domains. Demons with and without domains were on 2 different levels. For example, Kong Mosa, who'd attacked the supernatural organization's headquarters. He was a big demon and had a powerful demonic domain. As for the 4 great commanders under him, although they were all great fiends, they were all great demons. But their strength was worlds apart from Kong Mosa's. Ordinary mid-level demons might be stronger than big demons. But without demonic domains, they had no decisive power. Therefore, although great demons were classified as intermediate demons, they were closer to demon lords. Qin Zhao's heart ached as he watched the demons fall one after another. Half of the fallen demons were summoned by Toddy Belster. To Qin Zhao, the fallen demons weren't demons, but money. How could Toddy Belster summon a demon army? He was an ordinary person. He didn't even have magic. Unless it was a few taboos. Under normal circumstances, ordinary people couldn't use magic. But Toddy Belster could. It wasn't just because of the handsome guy's summoning magic array. It was also because of Qin Zhao's wealth in hell. That was half of the 3-headed demon lord's wealth. Rather than saying that these demons were summoned, it would be better to say that they were hired. Before Qin Zhao's wealth in hell was used up, Toddy Belster could summon infinitely. But at the end of the day, it was still money. Where's your enemy? Which one? Qin Zhao asked. He's not on this battlefield. Not on this battlefield? Where is it? I don't know. Aqualati Gisli shook his head. That guy is very strange. Every time a strong enemy comes, he is nowhere to be seen. But every time, the enemy will leave angrily. Could he have dragged me into a different dimension to fight? No, it's because those powerful enemies would often stand still on the spot, and after a short while, they would leave in shock. Is it a mental battlefield? Chen Zhao was hesitant. He had once had a mental battle. However, he was not afraid of a battle in his sea of consciousness. This was because as long as one knew how to use the sea of consciousness to fight, one would be able to possess the same strength as in reality. Whether it was in the enemy's sea of consciousness or in one's own sea of consciousness. Moreover, his soul power was extraordinary. Of course, this was just Chen Zhao's personal guess. From Aqualati Gisli's description, it didn't seem to be as simple as a mental battle. However, it's time for me to show up. If I don't come out, I don't think Tajimas will come out in person. Aqualati Gasly also knew the situation on the battlefield like the back of his hand. The combat power of the psionic team had indeed exceeded his expectations. However, it was only unexpected. It was far from being decisive. The evil demon army was a refreshing sight, but the evil demon island's true power wasn't the evil demon army. With enough time, the demon commanders could kill all the demons summoned by the psionic team. After all, there was only one big demon on one side, while the other side had 7. The difference in high-end power was too great. So, Aqualati Gasly decided to make a move. Simenta and Hepri stared at Aqualati Gasly's back. Then they saw Aqualati Gasly open his arms and lean toward the cliff outside. No way. Is he committing suicide? Hepri's eyes widened as he watched Aqualati Gasly fall off the cliff. I can't understand it at all. Suddenly, a huge and terrifying tentacle rose up and blocked the hole that Acrobumen had created. The length and size of this tentacle was equivalent to Acrobumen's body. Acrobumen's face was filled with shock. He's really a giant North Sea demon. Simenta and Hepri were also shocked. The two rushed out of the hole. At this time, they were finally able to see Aqualati Gisli's real body. The legendary giant North Sea demon. How big was Aqualati Gasly's real body? Even Chen Zhao was shocked. Because Aqualati Gasly's real body was more than 2,000 meters tall. If his 2 longest tentacles spread out, they would probably be 10,000 meters long. Aqualati Gasly's real body was a supergiant octopus. However, he didn't have 8 arms like an ordinary octopus. Instead, he had 16 tentacles. 8 tentacles were big and 8 small. But even the smallest tentacle was about the same diameter as an adult dragon. As soon as Aqualati Gasly appeared, the entire battlefield quieted down. Too big, it was simply too big. When the Great Tao reached a terrifying level, it was like a moving mountain. One of Aqualati Gasly's tentacles slammed into the forest, creating a huge gap. Tegmas, come out! Aqualati Gasly roared. I'm back for revenge! He cut a demon in half at the waist with one slash. Yanghua took a deep breath and looked back at his psionic teammates. They had advanced less than 1,000 meters since they had landed. And this was the result of Toddy Belster's help in the rear. They couldn't imagine what would happen if Toddy Belster wasn't there. How would they fight this battle? Yanghua couldn't help but look back at Toddy Belster, who was standing on the bow. Toddy Belster was the only one who hadn't disembarked. But he was also the only one who didn't need to disembark, and could use his full power. Even though he had summoned 100,000 demons, he still didn't stop. He seemed to be able to summon more demons. No matter how many were lost on the battlefield, he could replenish them endlessly. Chapter 2540. What is that? Blitz's mouth was agape, an expression of disbelief on his face. Are we going to fight that thing? We can't win. It's impossible. Yanghua also had a shocked expression on his face. That thing was too big. It was indescribably big. Mr. Belster! Yanghua looked at Toddy. Toddy Belster was also frightened. He was different from others. He wasn't very brave. Now that he saw that thing, he was even more terrified. It wasn't in his plan. Now, he finally understood. Qin Zhao had reminded him before he left. However, he couldn't back down now. Just then, Toddy Belster opened her arms. A large magic array appeared before her. Then, giant demons crawled out of the array. The smallest of them was several meters tall, while the bigger ones were more than 10 or 20 meters. They either flew or ran. They were much stronger than the demons she'd summoned earlier. Some were even holding weapons. Yang Wu saw Toddy Belster summon these powerful demons. He felt a little more at ease. However, he was also worried if Toddy Belster could summon enough demons to defeat the terrifying behemoth. As soon as Aqualati Ghastly's unparalleled body appeared, it attracted a large number of demons. Regardless of friend or foe, they all charged at Aqualati Ghastly. Aqualati Ghastly's tentacles swept past. Countless demons were smashed into meat paste. Just then, more demons pounced at Aqualati Ghastly. However, they were more like ants in front of Aqualati Ghastly. Qin Zhao frowned. It was one thing for Aqualati Ghastly to kill the enemy, but why did he kill his own people too? Moreover, the people he'd killed had all been hired with his own money. Xiaolong Nu, tell your husband that he's one of us, Qin Zhao said. If you don't want that old guy to smash your husband into meat paste. Akra Buman nodded. She moved. Her giant body created a strong current of air. Thankfully, most of the enemies were attracted by Aqualati Ghastly. Akra Buman wasn't completely unharmed, but at least it was within her acceptable range. Bang! Dust flew in front of Yanghua. Akra, how are you? Yanghua was very worried when he saw that his wife was covered in wounds. He regretted bringing Akra Buman along. Qin Zhao had warned him a few times before. This place was far more dangerous than he had imagined. But he turned a blind eye to it. Or it could be said that he was holding on to a fluke mentality. Especially after Toddy Belster displayed his great strength. He also felt that they might not necessarily lose in this expedition to Bermuda. Hubby, that big guy is one of us. Tell Master Belster not to attack him. What? That big guy is one of us. How could this be? When did we ever have that kind of ally? Akra Buman looked anxious. There were some things she knew, but she definitely couldn't say it in public. She knew about Qin Zhao and Yanghua's relationship, but if she said this in front of everyone, then the relationship between Yanghua and the psionic ability team would collapse. Are you sure that guy isn't the big boss here? It's true. He's enemies with the demons here. Look at those demons. They're all attacking that big guy. Only then did Yanghua notice that, indeed, both the enemy and friend seemed to be attacking the super big guy. Of course, the big guy was also attacking indiscriminately. When a demon charged over, Yanghua didn't even need to do anything. Akra Buman sent it flying with a slap. Open a path for our people. I'll go tell Master Belster. Yanghua jumped in front of Toddy Belster. Master Belster, that big guy isn't an enemy. He's on our side. On our side? Are you sure? Yes. My wife told me. Yanghua didn't know the exact situation now. Akra Buman seemed to know more. But her hesitant gaze indicated that there were some things that she couldn't say in public. Fine. Separate your demon army from the enemy. Don't get tangled up with them. Otherwise, that big guy's attacks won't be able to differentiate between friend and foe. Got it. Toddy Belster immediately ordered the demon army he summoned to split up and reorganize their formation. But he didn't let the demon army completely merge. Even though Yanghua told him that the super big monster was their ally. But before he was completely sure, he didn't dare to risk so many demons. Just then, Aqualati Ghastly suddenly raised his tentacles and waved them at the enemy's demon army. And this time, without constraints, Aqualati Ghastly, who was completely free, also had no scruples. In an instant, the heavens fell and the earth cracked. The entire forest was flattened. Thousands of enemies were obliterated. Sure enough, he didn't attack us, Toddy Belster exclaimed in surprise. Very good. With this big guy, we'll be under a lot less pressure. After confirming that the big guy was on their side, it wasn't just Toddy Belster who was more confident. When Yanhua passed the news to the others, they all felt the same way. Originally, they thought they were dead for sure. They didn't expect things to turn around. The super big monster was actually on their side. Blitz even thought there might be a chance to rope the super big guy into the psionic team. Leaving that aside, Aqualati Gisli was in trouble. The 7 devil commanders locked their eyes on Aqualati Gisli. These 7 great demon commanders all had their own domains. Moreover, they were all powerful demons second only to Leviathan Aberrant Tigmus. None of the 7 demon commanders were easy targets for Aqualati Gisli to kill. Suddenly, Aqualati Gisli aimed his mouth at the sky. Puff! A jet of black ink shot up into the sky. The black ink didn't attack any demons. And this kind of attack hardly hit anyone. But after the black ink shot into the clouds, black rain began to fall from the sky. In an instant, a large number of demons fell to the ground. It was another indiscriminate attack. Chapter 2541. Those who couldn't put up a magic shield, had nothing to hide, or had low poison resistance all fell. But it was indeed useful. Half of the demons were gone in an instant. Of course, the psionic team was also affected. Akrabumon used her dragon wings to block the poisonous rain for Yanhua and Toddy Belster. Dragons had high poison resistance. In fact, dragons were resistant to almost everything. Damn! Is that monster really on our side? Save me! Save me! Aqualati's move successfully made 3/4 of the psionic team lose the ability to fight. In fact, not only did they lose the ability to fight, but they also lost their lives. Akrabumon was also shocked. She also didn't expect Aqualati to use such an indiscriminate attack. Aqualati, we know you too well, a demon leader said. This means nothing to us. None of the 7 demon leaders were hit. After all, they'd once been colleagues. So they knew Aqualati Gisli. Just like how Aqualati Gisli knew them. Really? Do you really know me? Aqualati Gisli sneered at the 7 demon leaders. Just then, the poisonous rain began to evaporate. The air was filled with black poisonous gas. Be careful, don't breathe it in. The 7 demon leaders warned each other. The evaporating poisonous gas covered a wide area. Several mountains were enveloped by the gas. Regardless of whether it was plants, animals, or demons, most would not be spared. The deeper they went, the thicker it got. They couldn't even see their own fingers. Suddenly, a huge black shadow reached out from the poisonous gas. Bang! With a loud bang, a demon commander was struck and fell into the range of the poisonous gas. Then, it never came out again. What? How? How is that possible? Where did that tentacle come from? Aqualati Gisli was right in front of them. He hadn't moved just now. Everyone had seen his entire body. Logically, he couldn't have ambushed them. But why did a tentacle come out of the poisonous gas? Qin Zhao was also surprised. As a bystander, he saw more clearly than the demon leaders. Aqualati Gisli indeed didn't move. At least his body didn't move. But why was there a tentacle in the poisonous gas? Be careful, there's something strange down there. The remaining 6 evil demon commanders were terrified. At present, they did not know what was going on. But as long as he was whipped by Aqualati Gisli's tentacles, it was definitely a narrow escape. One of their companions was already 1 step ahead of them. But at that moment, a tentacle reached down from the sky without any warning. Oh no, be careful, quick, dodge! The 3 devil commanders dodged. However, the 2 demon commanders did not expect the tentacles to fall from the sky, causing them to be slapped down by the tentacles. There was another demon commander who reacted a little slower. By the time he reacted, he had run in the wrong direction and was fleeing downwards. The fog below once again stretched out a tentacle and wrapped around the fiend commander. In the blink of an eye, 3 evil demon commanders had fallen, and it was unknown whether they were dead or alive. The expressions of the remaining 3 demon commanders changed drastically. Once upon a time, Aqualati Gasly was their boss. He was also the most powerful subordinate under Leviathan Abhantagemus, and the leader of all the demons. But at that time, they were not demon commanders yet. After Aqualati Gisli's betrayal, they gained the status of devil commanders. They had once thought that if Aqualati Gasly dared to appear before them, they would be able to use his demon heart to prove their loyalty and strength to their master. They had once thought that if Aqualati Gasly dared to appear before them, they could use his demon heart to prove their loyalty and strength to their master. They did not think that Aqualati Gasly was qualified to be a demon commander. But now, they did not dare to think so anymore. Of the 8 demon commanders, except for Charmin who had disappeared, 4 of the 7 demon commanders had died. Qin Zhao looked at the sky in confusion. Just now, Aqualati Gasly had sprayed the ink poison into the sky and then landed on the ground. Then, the tentacles fell to the ground. In other words, the area that was contaminated by the ink poison would have tentacles appearing. Just then, the poisonous gas started spreading upward. Under Aqualati Gasly's control, the area at the edge spread the fastest, almost forming an enclosed area. Suddenly, Aqualati Gasly froze on the spot. Wow! In just a few seconds, Aqualati Gasly seemed to be in a daze, but he suddenly came back to his senses. But at this time, Aqualati Gisli had many wounds on his body. Qin Zhao's eyes widened and he looked at Aqualati Gasly in shock. What's going on? Aqualati, what's wrong? What's going on? Divine gear! Aqualati shouted at Qin Zhao. Divine gear, divine gear. Be careful of divine gear, divine gear? Qin Zhao stared at Aqualati Gasly. His wounds were caused by divine gear? Just then, a gust of wind blew the poisonous gas away. But an even bigger fog shrouded Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao frowned. Suddenly, Aqualati Gasly disappeared. The next moment, Aqualati Gasly's aura appeared again. Suddenly, a huge tentacle slapped the mountain wall Qin Zhao was standing on. Qin Zhao was sent flying. Both Samantha and Hupari were shocked. Wasn't Aqualati Gasly with Qin Zhao? Why did he suddenly attack Qin Zhao? Qin Zhao's entire body was embedded into the wall. Qin Zhao was a bit angry. He was angry at Aqualati Gasly. Even if it was a joke, it was too much. This was a battlefield. He shouldn't joke like this. Qin Zhao pulled out the limb embedded in the wall. Both Samantha and Hupari were shocked. Qin Zhao was hit by Aqualati Gasly's tentacle, and he was completely unharmed. What was this guy's body made of? Steel? Qin Zhao came to the cave entrance again and looked at Aqualati Gasly's faintly discernible body angrily. Aqualati, tell me, why did you attack me? If you can't give me a satisfactory answer, I'll kill you. Aqualati Gasly's tentacle responded to Qin Zhao's question. His huge tentacles slapped at Qin Zhao again. A cold light shot out of Qin Zhao's eyes. He charged at the tentacle and grabbed it with both arms. Get out! Qin Zhao picked up Aqualati Gasly. Whoosh, boom, Samantha and Hupari widened their eyes. Were they seeing things? Qin Zhao was insignificant compared to Aqualati Gasly. The difference could even be described as tiny, but he'd sent the terrifying Aqualati Gasly flying? 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 2542. Aqualati, do you want to die? Aqualati didn't give Qin Zhao a verbal answer. Instead, he answered Qin Zhao with his actions. Aqualati suddenly spewed a large amount of ink poison at Qin Zhao. Of course, this attack couldn't reach Qin Zhao. Aqualati, this is my last warning to you. Aqualati Gasly was Qin Zhao's ally. Qin Zhao could also feel that Aqualati wasn't normal. But Qin Zhao didn't know what the problem was. Was it an illusion? Making me and Aqualati Gisli hallucinate and think that the other party is attacking me? After the ink poison spread out, it turned into a poisonous mist and started rising. It's coming! A dozen tentacles suddenly shot out from the poisonous mist. Bang, bang, Qin Zhao was slapped to the ground. At the same time, the tentacles smashed the ground continuously. Simenta and Hepari's faces were pale. Qinzhao should have died under that kind of destructive attack, right? Suddenly, Aqualati Gisli's head deformed. Something sharp seemed to be trying to drill out of his head. Break! Aqualati Gisli's head exploded in a shower of blood. Qinzhao looked at Aqualati Gisli's body. He had just drilled directly into Aqualati Gisli's mouth and destroyed his bodily functions from the inside. Simenta clutched his chest and looked at Qinzhao, who was floating in the air not far away. Was this really the world he knew? Qinzhao furrowed his brows. His face was still filled with coldness. It wasn't because he had killed Aqualati. It was because this wasn't the real Aqualati. The Great North Sea Demon shouldn't be this weak, right? Also, how could such a coward launch such a suicidal attack at him? Moreover, since Aqualati's abnormality, Qinzhao realized that there weren't any demons around. There were only him, Aqualati Simenta, and Hupari. This wasn't the real world. His senses weren't wrong. This was the real world. Suddenly, the wind blew again. The mist moved again. Just then, a cold light pierced through the mist. It went straight for Qinzhao's head. Qinzhao tilted his head to avoid it. At the same time, he reached out to grab something behind the mist. It wasn't a thing, it was just a person. This was a knight whose entire body was adorned with exquisite patterns. At least that was what he was wearing. The knight swung his sword, wanting to kill Qinzhao. But before that, Qinzhao had already crushed his head. Qinzhao narrowed his eyes. There were actually hundreds of knights within the range of his domain. To be precise, he was a magic knight. Their bodies were covered with a large amount of magic. Qinzhao looked at the blood on his hand. It was warm and not fake. But why? These magic knights didn't give Qinzhao too much trouble. Behind these magic knights, there were also a few witches who blessed them. Qinzhao ended the battle in a very short time. The wind started to move again, bringing along the mist. Qinzhao's pocket world didn't sense any enemies. At the very least, it was not within the scope of the small world. Qinzhao was surprised. Was it over? Suddenly, he felt countless auras appear above his head. Qinzhao looked up. His eyes could not see through the mist. But above the mist, there seemed to be countless colorful spots of light flashing. Furthermore, those colorful specks of light were like a galaxy embellished with stars, lining up in the sky for thousands of meters. Suddenly, a beam of light shot out of Qinzhao's eyes. Qinzhao was too familiar with this attack. Lilith of the Thousand Hands. Lilith, who had already died in Qinzhao's hands. Lilith, who had countless hands as wings. Lilith, who could release countless spells at the same time. Qinzhao frowned. Why would someone who had already died in his hands appear before him again? Had the escaped Lilith of the Holy Light and Elemental Lilith revived her? Qinzhao had devoured Lilith of the Dark and found information about Nirvana from her memories. Like the original Lilith, only other Nirvana witches could inherit the characteristics of Nirvana. So, the Lilith that Qinzhao had killed shouldn't be able to revive. Suddenly, a beam of white light wrapped around Qinzhao. A binding spell of the holy light element? The moment Qinzhao was bound, countless spells fell. Simenta and Hupari saw the most beautiful fireworks display in their lives. It was too beautiful. It was more splendid and dazzling than any known fireworks display. However, behind the beauty, it was filled with fatal danger. Ignoring the spells falling on him, Qinzhao charged at the Lilith of the Thousand Hands in the sky. Qinzhao was too familiar with this enemy. But they didn't learn their lesson. After Qinzhao tore the first Lilith into pieces, Qinzhao found the second Lilith hidden in the mist. She didn't learn her lesson either. Qinzhao did what he couldn't do the first time. Last time, Lilith had escaped, but this time, she didn't choose to run. But Qinzhao didn't feel good. First, it was Aqualati Gisli. Then it was the knights that looked like they were from the Middle Ages. Now it was Lilith. Lilith only had Lilith of the Holy Light and Lilith of the Thousand Hands. Lilith didn't have nothingness, enhancement, assassin, elemental, or darkness. What did this mean? The wind blew again and the mist surged. Again? This time, there was quite a lot of mist. Qin Zhao could see the sea beyond the coastline. However, the sea wasn't calm. There was a fleet on the surface. Qin Zhao raised an eyebrow. The leading aircraft carrier. No, they should have sunk already. How could they appear before him? Demi Sonnenfeld had said before. Because of Bermuda's operations, the number of ships and victims had increased in the past 2 years. It had triggered the American government, so they'd sent a fleet. But the fleet had also been wiped out. Why did the fleet that had sunk once again appear in front of him? Whoosh! More than a dozen planes flew over his head. Boom, 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 the attack came. Qin Zhao was locked on. All the attacks landed on his head. Simenta and Hupri exchanged glances. What's going on? First it's magic, and now it's a modern army? Is this fleet created by magic? Maybe forget it. Let's not care. We can't participate anyway. Whether it's magic or a modern army, it's fatal to us. That guy's a monster. He doesn't even care when a missile lands on his head. Chapter 2543. Only monsters would step into this place. That doesn't include us, Hepeli said. Hepeli said, those two guys have been plotting this for a long time. Everything was planned by them. Right now, Qin Zhao was hovering in the air. The missiles and machine gun bullets landed on him, but they didn't hurt him at all. Qin Zhao looked down at everything below him. Suddenly, he had an idea. He flew into the sky. Meteor! 20 minutes later, a meteor streaked across the sky. The next moment, a light source that looked like a small sun appeared on the coastline. The small sun created huge waves. The fleet was swallowed by the waves in the blink of an eye. 1/10 of Demon Island disappeared completely. A circular crater was left at the edge. All the mist on the island was instantly dispersed, and all the trees were uprooted. Simenta and Hepeli, who were at the entrance, were sent flying by the terrifying impact. Simenta and Hepeli were at the higher ground, so the impact was the least. But the shockwave was still very terrifying. When the two, bleeding, crawled to the entrance, they realized that Qin Zhao had returned. When he looked at the Demon Island again, he saw that it had already changed completely. Both of them were already pale with fright. What happened just now? Did they use nuclear weapons? You're really lucky, Qin Zhao said, looking at the bleeding duo. Not as lucky as you, Simenta said angrily. Qin Zhao suddenly had an idea. He left the entrance again. Still not back to normal? Qin Zhao had thought that everything would return to normal after dispersing the fog. But the result wasn't what he wanted. Was the destruction not thorough enough? Or did he not find the key point? Just then, countless ships appeared on the sea. This was also a fleet, but this fleet was different from the previous one. Because the fleet that appeared this time was a fleet of wooden sailboats. Moreover, their flags were also very strange. A while later, the fleet docked. Large numbers of soldiers rushed down from the ships. They wore chain mail or leather armor and held swords in their hands. Qin Zhao floated in the air. These people couldn't do anything. They could only shoot with arrows. But they still couldn't reach Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao looked at the soldiers who seemed to have come from the medieval era. Qin Zhao pondered. He didn't fight back. They couldn't attack him anyway. Suddenly, Qin Zhao's vision blurred. The next moment, a black shadow shrouded over. Qin Zhao looked up. Bang! A huge tentacle covered his face. Qin Zhao jumped up and roared. Aqualati, I'm going to kill you again! Wait! Qin, I didn't do it on purpose. Aqualati Gisli was shocked and quickly explained. You suddenly appeared in my attack range. Why are you still alive? Didn't I kill you? Qin Zhao looked at Aqualati Gisli with an unfriendly expression. How many times did it take you to find a way? Aqualati Gisli asked. Answer me first. What happened to me just now? How long did I disappear for? Maybe 3 or 4 seconds. Earlier, you were still at the cave halfway up the mountain. Then, you suddenly appeared in my attack range. I don't know how I escaped that situation, Chen Zhao said. There must be an enemy that you can't defeat in a short time. I know it must be me who helped you last for half an hour, right? You mean, as long as I can hold on for half an hour, I'll be able to get out of there? Yes. Aqualati Gasly nodded, but he was more interested in another question. Were you attacked by me for half an hour? And then you couldn't do anything to me? What about you? Did you meet me? Of course I killed you, Aqualati Gasly said. Oh, really? Chen Zhao chuckled. What skills did I use? Didn't you just fight hand to hand? Your fists didn't hurt at all. Chen Zhao pursed his lips. The enemies I encounter in that state are random? Or controlled by someone? Or is it prearranged? I'm just guessing. When I was serving under Tajimas in the past, I came into contact with the people who attacked Demon Island. Unfortunately, I met some of them just now, Tajimas said with a smile on his face. What exactly happened? I told you, Tajimas has a divine artifact. Get to the point. This divine artifact can record every enemy that attacks Demon Island, Aqualati Gasly said. Aqualati Gasly said. It's like some clips, and then put me or you into this clip. I just held on for 30 minutes, and after I came out, I realized something. This recorded clip of the enemy is long. It's 30 minutes. I thought I traveled through time, Chen Zhao said. But thinking about it carefully, he knew that it was impossible. At least, Chen Zhao didn't think that Leviathan Aberrant Tajimas didn't have this ability. Even God might not have this ability. In fact, Aqualati Gasly was also very glad. Luckily, he hadn't encountered Chen Zhao's scene. Otherwise, he might really have been killed by Chen Zhao. After all, Chen Zhao's first sentence was that he would kill him again. Clearly, Chen Zhao had encountered him in a scene. And he'd even killed him. Suddenly, both Chen Zhao and Aqualati Gasly felt an oppressive feeling from above. Chen Zhao and Aqualati Gasly immediately looked up at the sky. A meteor fell from the sky. Chen Zhao's eyes widened. The meteor moved faster and faster, heading straight for Aqualati Gasly. Shrink. Hurry. I can't do it, Aqualati Gasly said, terrified. Chen Zhao suddenly grabbed Aqualati Gasly's tentacle and tossed it. The moment Aqualati Gasly was tossed out, the meteorite fell where Aqualati Gasly had been. Instantly, a huge impact swept in all directions. All the plants were instantly flattened. Chen Zhao was naturally in the center of the impact and was sent flying by the shockwave. Aqualati Gasly climbed back up. He saw the terrifying impact. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Which idiot did Tajimas steal this crazy skill from? Aqualati Gasly roared. Just then, 100-meter-tall demon climbed out of the huge crater created by the impact. The demon's head looked like a goat, but from the neck down, it was completely different from a harmless goat. However, as soon as it came out, it vomited a mouthful of blood. Half of its body was burnt. Chapter 2544. Damn, why is it like this? Why is it like this? The huge demon stood where he was. The charred parts on his body were fading away, replaced by new skin. He could feel that he'd copied Chen Zhao's constitution and skill. But why wasn't Chen Zhao injured at all when he used this move? But he'd almost fallen to his death when he used this move. His move wasn't as powerful as Chen Zhao's, but why was he injured so much? Just then, Chen Zhao arrived before the huge demon. Your Leviathan Aberrant Tajimas? Leviathan Aberrant Tajimas stared at Chen Zhao hatefully. Why can you use this move without getting hurt, but I can't? Did you copy my constitution? Chen Zhao chuckled. Was it so easy to copy his constitution? Perhaps the most basic constitution could be copied. But the most basic constitution was what Chen Zhao had obtained when he first taken the perfect strength potion. Qin Zhao believed that with Leviathan's power, he could copy this constitution. But what about the others? The Rage Blood and Gluttony bloodline definitely couldn't be copied. Because these two were from the same bloodline as Leviathan, the 7 Sin Demon Kings. He could probably copy the Eye of Power too and double his own strength. This was a divine power, but it wasn't too high level. He definitely couldn't copy Giant Spirit Transformation, Body Double, and Spells Return to 1. Body Double was a high-level spell that Old Turtle had taught him personally. At first, Qin Zhao had only learned the simplified version. Later, when he was strong enough, he learned the complete version. Giant Spirit Transformation was something he'd created later. It could even be said to be one of the top spells Qin Zhao had learned. The 10,000 techniques returned to 1 required one to learn the avatar technique in order to use it. Otherwise, it would be meaningless to use the 10,000 techniques returned to 1 alone. Then there was the key's evolution for Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao had always felt that the key was the highest level of his power system. So, Qin Zhao didn't think that Leviathan Aberrantigimus could copy the key's evolution for his constitution. In other words, Leviathan Aberrantigimus could only copy the basics of Qin Zhao's basics. As for Qin Zhao's other spells, Qin Zhao didn't have any objections. After all of Qin Zhao's combat power and main attacks were based on his own power. He couldn't replicate all of his abilities and bloodline, so he couldn't use those moves. Take Meteor for example. Leviathan Aberrantigimus had already tasted the bitter fruit. Was it that easy to release a meteor? Without a strong enough physique, it was no different from suicide. But even Qin Zhao had to admit that this guy's head was really hard. Even if he only copied his basic physique, it would be good if his physique could be doubled. However, he did not fall to his death. It could be seen that his own foundation was not bad. However, it had to be said that the power of the meteor cast by Leviathan Aberrantigimus was incredible. It was much weaker than Qin Zhao's complete version. It was less than 1/10 of Qin Zhao's. But even so, the power was still considerable. And at that time, his target was Aqualati Gasly. If Aqualati Gisli took the full blow, he would probably be killed in seconds. The destructive power of a meteor was similar to that of a neutron star. The closer it was to the center, the more terrifying it was. Suddenly, Aqualati Gisli's huge tentacle whipped Leviathan Aberrantigimus. Leviathan Aberrantigimus's huge body flew toward Qin Zhao. He didn't hold back at all. Level 3 of the Primordial Regression Technique. Bang! Leviathan Aberrantigimus was sent flying by Qin Zhao's punch. His chest and right shoulder completely disappeared. But soon, a green aura emerged from the broken part of his shoulder. Then, it healed at an astonishing speed. Qin Zhao raised an eyebrow. Fuck, his life force had been copied? How could this be? Isn't this too heaven-defying? Life force could be copied? Aqualati, the Leviathan bloodline can copy life force? Yes, but only once. In fact, all the same abilities, spells, and supernatural powers can only be copied once. He should have used up the number of times he could copy life force. He copied my life force. When he recovered, I felt it. It was exactly the same as my life force. Him? Copied yours? Is he crazy? You're just a human. No matter how strong you are, you're still a human, Aqualati Gisli exclaimed. Aqualati, you're still so stupid. Leviathan Aberrantigimus stood up again. Have you forgotten my ability? I can see the magic power and life force of others at a glance. Do you think I don't know what's going on with the person I'm copying? Aqualati Gisli turned to Qin Zhao. Do you have more life force than a normal person? Qin Zhao glanced at Aqualati Gisli and said indifferently, a little more. Whatever, it doesn't matter, Aqualati Gisli said. Besides, the more vitality he has, the more I can get, said Aqualati Gisli. Leviathan Aberrantigimus spread his hands. 200-meter-long black swords appeared in his hands. Aqualati Gisli, are you sure you can beat me? I'm not sure, Aqualati Gisli said honestly. But I have no other way out now. He was very free now. He was going to die anyway. If he took the risk, he might become a motorcycle. If I didn't want to get rid of your slavery, I wouldn't have lost 1,000 years of life force. And if I didn't lose 1,000 years of life force, I wouldn't come here to fight you. Then you can only blame your stupidity. As Leviathan Aberrantigimus spoke, his arm suddenly slashed toward Aqualati Gisli, who was thousands of meters away. Leviathan Aberrantigimus' arm turned into a tentacle and kept extending outwards. The giant black sword had already appeared above Aqualati Gisli's head. Shocked, Aqualati Gisli hurriedly dodged Leviathan Aberrantigimus' attack. Clearly, Leviathan Aberrantigimus had copied his ability. But just then, Leviathan Aberrantigimus opened his mouth and spat out a jet of ink. The ink poison sprayed directly on Aqualati Gisli's body. 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 2545. Of course, the ink poison was ineffective against Aqualati Gisli. After all, it was a copy of Aqualati Gisli's skill. Aqualati Gisli had absolute immunity and resistance. But the ink poison didn't rely on poison to defeat the enemy. When Aqualati Gisli was covered by the ink poison, tentacles began to emerge from his body. The tentacles didn't attach themselves to Aqualati Gisli's body. Instead, they covered the surface of the ink poison. Is that weird? I can even copy your domain, can't I? Leviathan Aberrantigimus said proudly. The tentacles that grew out of Aqualati Gisli's body were wrapping around him. Aqualati Gisli struggled with all his might. But he knew his own strength. This was his territory, the tentacle territory. The territory couldn't be disintegrated. Aqualati Gisli's territory was very special. His territory didn't move with him. It was determined by the range of his ink poison. The number of ink poison he spat out would determine the range it covered, and the tentacles would extend from it. As long as he couldn't get rid of the ink poison on him, he couldn't get rid of the tentacle territory. So, he had to get to the seaside and let the seawater wash away the ink poison. Leviathan Aberran's attention returned to Qin Zhao. Who exactly are you? Why is my copy of you so ineffective? Leviathan Aberrantigimus couldn't confirm Qin Zhao's identity. Because Qin Zhao's aura was very special. Judging from the aura, he should be human. But he had the smell of a demon. The smell was also very strange. It was like the blood of gluttony, but also like the blood of anger. But that was impossible. Because of the 7 demon kings, apart from Satan, there were no subordinates. The subordinates of the other 6 demon kings couldn't mix. The subordinates of the 6 demon kings could mix with other demon bloodlines. For example, Beelzebub, Zophi, and Iris. One was a subordinate of gluttony, and the other was a dragon. But Beelzebub Zophi couldn't mix with the other 6 demon kings to produce offspring. That was why Leviathan Aberrantigimus found it strange that Qin Zhao's aura was so complicated. It's not bad, Qin Zhao said. You've stolen a lot from me. Of course, Leviathan Aberrantigimus knew. His constitution had improved, and secondly, he had stolen Qin Zhao's life force. Not even a great lord had ever seen such a massive amount of life force. But Qin Zhao's vitality was truly shocking. It was so huge that it made people's hair stand on end. It was also terrifying. What is this human in front of me? Was he really human? Right now, Qin Zhao had already activated the 3rd level of the primordial regression technique. Leviathan Aberrantigimus suddenly swung his 2 swords and attacked Qin Zhao. Leviathan Aberrantigimus could sense the enemy's strength, magic, and even life force. However, he could only sense basic attributes. Most of Qin Zhao's attributes were stacked with skills. Qin Zhao suddenly moved, turning into a stream of light. He directly crashed into the center of the 2 crossed swords. Quang! The 2 giant swords were immediately broken. Qin Zhao grabbed the hilts of the 2 broken swords and slashed at Leviathan Aberrantigimus. Hiss! Leviathan Aberrantigimus's head flew into the air. Everything had happened too quickly. Leviathan Aberrantigimus couldn't react at all. Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis had obtained the same life force as Chen Zhao. Normal attacks were useless against him. If he attacked, he would kill. Chen Zhao started with his own weakness. After cutting off his head, Chen Zhao didn't believe that he could survive. But just when Chen Zhao thought the battle was over, a body grew out of Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis's head. The headless body also grew out a head. Fuck! You can do this too? This is the undead Yura body. I copied this spell from an Easterner. I also learned this skill, Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis said. No matter which part of my body you cut off, I can regrow it completely. Originally, this ability had a huge flaw, and that was that it required a huge amount of life force. Even I didn't dare to use this ability casually, but the life force I copied from you solved this problem for me. Chen Zhao stopped attacking. Rubbing his chin, he pondered. Ha! Are you at your wit's end? Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis grinned. I admit that you're strong, even stronger than me. But sometimes being strong won't let you win. Although he said it was easy, he knew how terrifying this human was. He'd killed him instantly and decapitated him. Chen Zhao had killed him instantly and decapitated him. If he didn't have the undead Yura body and copied the opponent's life force, this would solve his problem of being killed instantly to a large extent. He would probably have a headache now, wondering how to face an enemy like this. Chen Zhao's overwhelming power made him not dare to underestimate him at all. Leave now. I don't have any conflict of interest with you, Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis said. You're right. Chen Zhao nodded. How about this? Give me this island and leave the body behind. Then we'll call it a day. How about that? Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis's expression changed involuntarily. Looks like we'll have to fight to the end of our lives. Although Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis was confident that his undying Yura body could make him almost immortal, he was not confident that he could survive. But the opponent's life force was also very strong. With such a strong life force, the opponent definitely had a similar undead body. And it was an ability that he couldn't copy. At least, the undead Yura body could be copied, but the opponent's similar skill couldn't be copied. This meant that the opponent's similar skill level was very high. Plus, the opponent's terrifying lethality. The ability to kill him instantly made him want to turn and run. Of course, it was never his habit to sit still and wait for death to come. Giving up on the battle and choosing to run was a choice he'd make in a desperate situation. He wasn't in that situation yet. Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis took a deep breath. He grabbed a few pieces of flesh from his body and threw them on the ground. Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis's clones appeared on the battlefield one by one. 9 Heaven's Divine King. Chapter 2546. There were 5 Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis clones at the scene, plus the clone that Chen Zhao had cut off his head and his original body. This meant that there were 7 Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis on the battlefield. Huh! Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis frowned. He realized that 2 clones were missing from the battlefield. He'd thrown out 7 pieces of his flesh. But there were only 5 clones. Just then, Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis saw Aqualati Gisli's tentacles. The 2 missing pieces of flesh were Aqualati Gisli's doing. Aqualati Gisli had rushed into the sea to take a bath, then returned to the battlefield. This made Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis furious. Aqualati Gisli, however, was overjoyed. Tegmis, continue. Your flesh is surprisingly delicious, Aqualati Gisli said. Aqualati Gisli had gained a long-lost vitality from the flesh and blood of Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis. It was more delicious than any delicacy. Leviathan Aberrant Tegmis' anger was mixed with bewilderment, and even fear. You don't have the ability to obtain life force by devouring flesh. How did you do it? In the past 1,000 years, I've tried to learn other abilities to obtain life force and extend my life, but all of them failed. In the past 200 years, I've come into contact with science, biology, cytology, life science, and genetics. I've obtained 4 degrees. In my early years, I used my theoretical knowledge to create a laboratory and used myself as an experiment subject. At first, I sliced myself up and studied myself. Later, I taught students and trained a large group of human students. I let them study me. After decades of research, I finally came to the conclusion that the most effective and possible way for me to truly extend my life is you. Me? Leviathan Abhantagemus narrowed his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Anyway, he sensed that Aquilati Gisli's research wasn't that simple. Do you remember the drop of blood you left in my body when you enslaved me? That drop of blood is still there, but that drop of blood has almost fused with me. The vitality contained in this drop of blood is greater than my own, but no matter how great it is, there will still be a time when it dries up. Now this drop of blood has dried up, but you still have a lot of it. Every piece of your flesh and every drop of blood can bring me vitality. Aquilati Gisli looked at Qin Zhao. Qin, you can tear him apart. I'll take care of every piece of his flesh. He won't have any more clones. Anger and fear erupted from Leviathan Aberrantegmus' eyes. Qin Zhao couldn't help but laugh. All the problems were no longer problems. You owe me, and now I'm here to take it back, Aquilati Gisli said. I'll kill you! Then this problem does not exist, Leviathan Aberrantegmus said coldly. Kill him! Each of Leviathan Aberrantegmus' doppelgangers possessed the same power as the main body. Apart from the distribution of vitality and the fact that they shared the same mind, they were actually no different from the original body. This ability was almost the same as the complete version of Qin Zhao's clone. The difference was that Qin Zhao's clone relied on his own power to maintain itself. As long as the spell was removed, the clone would disappear too. On the other hand, Leviathan Aberrantegmus's clone ability relied on vitality to maintain itself. The clone would only disappear when the vitality was used up. Of course, Leviathan Aberrantegmus could retrieve these clones. Therefore, even if it was only a clone with a tiny portion of vitality, it could still crush Aquilati Gisli. A pair of black swords appeared in the clone's palms. He slashed at Aquilati Gisli. Just then, Aquilati Gisli stood still. His body suddenly collapsed into ink. Several mountains were dyed black by the ink. Do you think this liquefaction can prevent your death? Leviathan Abhantagemus' clone said in a cold tone. The twin swords of Leviathan Aberrantegmus' clone ignited in flames. He walked to the center of the ink and stabbed the flaming twin swords into the ground. Instantly, a large amount of ink evaporated. At this rate, it wouldn't take long for all the ink that Aquilati Gisli had turned into to evaporate. Suddenly, hundreds of thousands of thin tentacles shot out of the ink. These tentacles wrapped around Leviathan Aberrantegmus' clone. Leviathan Aberrantegmus immediately waved his swords and cut off tens of thousands of tentacles. However, in the next moment, more tentacles wrapped around Leviathan Aberrantegmus. A human figure appeared in the ink and shouted at Qin Zhao. Qin, help me kill him! The other Leviathan Aberrantegmus clones immediately stood in front of Qin Zhao. However, Qin Zhao didn't care how many Leviathan Aberrantegmus were in front of him. He turned into energy. Any clone that dared to stand in front of him would be pierced. Qin Zhao rushed to the clone that was temporarily restrained by Aquilati Gisli. Dig out the piece of flesh in his chest. That's the core. The clone was now completely locked by Aquilati Gisli. It couldn't even struggle. Aquilati Gisli was giving it his all. It was true that he couldn't defeat Leviathan Aberrantegmus. Even a doppelganger could make him flustered. But it wasn't like he hadn't developed his own moves over the years. Moreover, he didn't need to be afraid of Leviathan Aberrantegmus's replication ability. Qin Zhao dug out the piece of flesh in the clone's chest. The clone's core wasn't his brain, heart, or other organs. It was the piece of flesh that came from his original body. His current body was an extension of that piece of flesh. All of his life force spread out from the flesh. As Qin Zhao grabbed the piece of flesh, he threw it onto the ink on the ground. Soon, the flesh sank into the ink. Subsequently, the doppelganger controlled by Aquilati Gisli also collapsed and dissipated. Qin Zhao looked back at the clones of Leviathan Abercontigimus. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.